All right, we ready? All right, I call to order the Wednesday, November 20th meeting, 2019 of Norworth Borough Council at 7:32 p.m. Mr. Metric, could you call the roll?
Hi, good evening. Mr. Weiscord.
I'm here.
Ms. Rickards.
Here.
Ms. Pananopoulos.
Here.
Mr. McGreevy.
Here.
Mr. Bush.
Here.
Ms. Tevlin Moffett.
Present.
Mayor Andrea Deutsch.
Here.
And President Buter.
Here, thank you. I have no particular comments this evening except to mention that following the conclusion of this meeting, we will meet in executive session briefly to discuss potential litigation, personnel matters, and contract negotiations. Ms. Mayor, do you have a report?
I do, very short. I'm handing in my monthly report. I'd like to highlight a couple, here we go, we can hand that in. I'd like to highlight just a couple areas of month to month, this October versus last October, because we've had some terrific work on behalf of our police department. There has been a 78% decrease in major crime offenses in the borough for month to month. As far as traffic citations are going, there's a 150% increase over citations issued this month versus October of last year. And I think as part of the increased traffic control, we've had a 92% drop in auto accidents in the borough this month versus last month, which is phenomenal. And I'd really like to give our police and Chief Gallagher a chance. A couple other notes. Recently, in fact this week, there were a few burglaries in the surrounding area in Lower Merion. So please, this time of year is especially a time of year when people are looking for money and objects. So I would really impart on you the importance of keeping your cars locked, even if they're in your driveway, and keeping your homes locked when you leave. And let's just be proactive and not make ourselves an easy target. So, and that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Pananopoulos, you win the gold star. Would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Metric, I will defer to you to begin the conversation from our traffic engineer.
Thank you, Baron. This evening in the House is John Urick from McMahon Associates, the borough's traffic engineer, to talk mainly about the Norworth Avenue bridge, the temporary conditions on the bridge, that being how traffic and pedestrian and bicycle traffic are being currently managed on the bridge, and those concerns that were raised by the community. And we met with members of the cycling club, business members, chief of police, myself, director of public works, to work out those details, and John's team went back to the drawing board, and we're here to hear what John has to say.
Okay, John, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd also like to commend, as the traffic engineer, the police's work in reducing traffic accidents throughout the borough. That's great news. So we're here today, just as a little bit of background. As you know, sometime in the spring, borough was notified that the bridge, Norworth Avenue bridge, was unsafe, as well as the pedestrian sidewalks. So the borough moved immediately to close the bridge to vehicular traffic. And for a brief period of time, it was this nice pedestrian bikeway, which when I saw it, I was like, this is going to be hard to go back to anything else. But we were tasked to come up with a quick solution on how to try to accommodate vehicular traffic, at least one way to get traffic into downtown, as well as to safely accommodate the pedestrians. So really our goal was really to kind of approach it, one, make sure it's safe, and two, to kind of balance the different modes of traffic, and that being vehicular traffic, pedestrians, and bicyclists. So we did develop a temporary plan that the Public Works Department went out and implemented, and that was installed and in place for, I guess, a few months over the summer. And then we kind of made aware of some of the concerns raised by the community, the bicycling community, about how the temporary plans may not have accommodated them fully or in a desirable manner. So, so the temporary plan did allow one-way northbound vehicular traffic into town. We separated the pedestrian path on the bridge with the temporary barriers. So instead of pedestrians walking on the sidewalks that's closed, they were in the pathway along the cartway of the bridge that once accommodated two-way traffic. We did try to introduce a traffic calming element because we did want to try to slow traffic going over the bridge because we were mixing traffic. Pedestrians were in the roadway, although they were separated. There were going to be bikes, as it was before, bikes in the road as well, but we really wanted to try to slow traffic down. So that's why our initial recommendation was to kind of create that chicane effect where we're shifting traffic over to the east or western side, kind of what would be in the oncoming traffic, the southbound traffic lane. So really the impetus of that, again, was trying to slow traffic, try to make it a little bit safer. And that the bicyclists would be accommodated in two ways. One, if you were heading northbound, you could travel in the northbound direction with vehicular traffic. It would be a mixed condition, as it is today. And then if you were coming southbound, there's really nowhere to put them other than they have to also use the pedestrian area, that shared area. So technically, that bike lane or that pedestrian bike lane, we can't get that any wider. So technically, in the southbound direction, that would be a condition where the bicyclist should dismount and walk the bike over. I know that's not desirable for the bicyclist, especially in Norworth. There's a strong contingent of people that have to carry bikes and are lugging kids and shopping items and different things. So that is a difficulty, but we don't really have any place else to put them. So that's kind of all in the balancing of the recommendations. So as Sean alluded to, we did meet recently with the community, and some of the highlights of that meeting were some of the concerns that were raised about the existing plan. Those being disregard for the one-way condition. It was kind of sounded like it was a mix of maybe some people not knowing or knowing too late and getting confused. So that could be a signage issue, and then it sounded like there was some just blatant disregard for the condition. So that's a little harder to plan for. We can do our best. There was concern about the pedestrian sight line at the northern crossing. Fortunately, closing that the sidewalk on the western side, closer to the train station, that fencing does jut out a little bit. It's not the most ideal situation. We did have Public Works push it back a little bit. And then there is, I admit, there is an inconvenience and difficulty for bicyclists that do have to cross over, dismount if they so choose, and then mix with the traffic in that pedestrian area and then cross back over. It's not the most ideal condition, but we felt that initially that was the safest option to kind of balance all the different modes of traffic using the bridge. And then there were some concerns raised about U-turns in front of the stores if you're heading southbound, approaching the bridge, for those people trying to park in front of the shops. So those were kind of the major highlights of that discussion. And the bicycle group also did present us with a possible plan on how potentially we could reconfigure the different elements going over the bridge and provide a separated bike lane in the southbound direction. We would shift the protected barriers from the east side to the west side. So I'll get into that. So what we did was, so we have two alternatives I'm going to discuss tonight. The first alternative is maybe some adjustments to the existing plan. That's what's out there. And then the second is kind of what we would recommend based on what was presented to us by the community. And then we can kind of talk about, after I kind of go through what they are, we can talk about some of the benefits and challenges of each. And then we'll go from there. So I do have some handouts for the board if it's easier to view it. There's a few of each, so take one from each pile, pass it down. Some extras. I wasn't sure how I was going to view on the wall, so. So again, this is alternative A. This is basically some modifications to what is out there today.
Does everybody have an A and a B?
I have an A and a B.
Do you have a B?
I have a piece.
Wait, you know what?
But isn't it public like?
No, I have.
I know, it's, I know.
Sorry.
Choose A and B, so if anybody would like to.
Does it specify that? That's both?
Yeah, that's B, that's A, so you can take one of each.
All right, so what we did was schematic diagram related on top of an aerial. Pretty good aerial. I'd say the only thing that's a little difficult to see is the sidewalk on the east side as you come on the north side of the bridge. So that's just highlighted with this yellow line. But you do see the sidewalk on the west side. And just a reminder, when we were laying this out, it was a kind of a quick condition that popped up. We didn't have traffic data. We were trying to estimate where people would be wanting to go, what paths they would take. So I think in discussion with some of the community, I think there are some valid points to both plans, which I will highlight. But again, this is basically what's out there. There have been a few tweaks to some signage out there that haven't been reflected, which is great. And you know, in a condition like this, with pedestrian facilities, bike facilities, and these kind of conditions where you have to do a quick fix, you know, it's not rare to kind of go back and have to tweak it a few times. So I would be frustrated that, you know, we don't have maybe what's going to be the final product out there just yet. Kind of takes a little bit of give and take, so it's not uncommon. But anyway, here you can see this is the barrier that's out there. Pedestrian and I guess southbound bike area would be continues to be on the eastern side. And I didn't have time to. I only drove by. I didn't have time to walk up, but I'm not sure if Public Works did adjust this crosswalk or not, but that is one thing we did discuss, where it would come in a little bit farther away from the fence, closer to the front of the dance studio, and then we would create a little handicap curb ramp, temporary asphalt ramp there. So to help with the sight lines a little bit, that would also give some area off the bridge where if the borough wanted to add a temporary speed hump, they do sell those products, and there might be some nearby municipalities or businesses that have them that we could maybe borrow temporarily if they're not being used. And we did recommend some signage to, if what's out there today isn't working, it could be some further tweaks. And what could happen to make it a little bit biker friendly on the north side is we do still have some extra width out here. We could stripe in that bike lane coming southbound. We do have room for that, and up here where the barrier is, we could potentially adjust that or replace it with some, instead of the barrier, we could replace it with the barrels to take up a little less room, still provide that physical barrier, but allow some room for bicyclists to get around it while they're in the street and not have to either go up onto the sidewalk or drive into oncoming traffic. So that's an adjustment we could make with the existing plan. So again, there's a few signage which I'm not going to go into detail because I haven't gotten the feedback yet on how things have been since these most recent adjustments have been made. If anybody knows.
I did get some positive feedback on the new signs. One of the business owners came back to me and said, "Oh yeah, this is much better, thank you." So.
Okay. So, again, basically what's out there today with some minor modifications and maybe to help with the bicyclists and make it a bit more accommodating. Again, they're still going to need to cross as they do today, back and forth. They're coming southbound.
My question is, for either one of these, just painted area for bikes, is it possible to add any kind of bollards or anything like that? Even sort of, lightweight, flimsy ones, just to make it a little bit more protected? I don't know.
Yes, we can, and it's on the second.
Oh, okay. I didn't see the bar.
It's a little bit more defined on the second plan.
Got it. Sorry about that. I didn't see it.
And I would say this, we could probably accommodate that in this plan as well.
Okay.
So it was just, if we're doing that, we can go to the second plan. But that's fine. So as I was saying, the bicyclists coming southbound, I don't know why that's so hard to say tonight, but they are going to come down and they're still going to need to cross. Technically, they're supposed to dismount, come over the bridge, and then if they're heading southbound, they can cross back over like that. Not the most ideal condition, I admit, but we're trying to balance the safety.
Are you asking at this point if you had feedback or questions on this scenario, or what?
I was asking if you had any feedback on the temporary conditions.
Sure. I've been hearing from people that they get to the Elmwood South Norworth Avenue intersection, and they're not certain if there's going to be cars coming towards them over the bridge. So I think that suggests to me that a one-way sign or even a painted arrow at this end, at the southern end, would be needed.
Is that people coming out of Elmwood, or
no, people coming north on South Norworth Avenue. They get to that stop bar, and they're not sure if there's going to be cars coming from the other direction.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so they're wondering, can I really go that way or not? And there's not a one-way, there's no indication that it's one way.
Okay.
So they think that chicane might be sending traffic southbound and towards them.
Okay, all right, then we can make that adjustment.
So they assume they go around, they think it's closed.
We can add another sign.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the second alternative. This is based off of the plan that was sent to our office from the bicycle group. And as you can see here, once you pass the parking lot driveway, they were calling for a separated bike lane. There would be delineators in the road as well as paint. And then what they are recommending is that you get rid of the chicane effect and push the barrier over to the west side. And then traffic or bicycle traffic could continue straight through along with pedestrians on this side of the road. And then as you're coming northbound, vehicular traffic would continue northbound on its same side, or on the proper side, without the chicane, and then the northbound bicyclists again would be mixed with traffic. Really, there's some separation here in the southbound direction, and we're basically limiting the chicane and shifting it over. So those are the major differences with the two plans. The signing is pretty similar, slightly different, but not really worth getting into those details. So, does anybody have any questions on this plan?
This portion where there's, I guess it's J, right? Well, where sign J is that in Plan B? That
So
contains, and that's what the barrel box, the plastic barrier, what kind of barrier?
It did, based on the plan, it did not have any physical barrier.
Okay.
And with a designated painted bike lane, probably would not want to put that there.
Right, I was wondering how bikes would actually.
Yeah, I guess they would just drive right, continue, because they're going to be in a shared lane above that. They're going to mix with traffic.
So the risk is that there's less to signal the cars that they're not allowed to.
Yes.
Southbound.
Yes,
Essentially. Austin, alternative A and B.
We didn't run cost estimates. It's a few signs, it's some pavement marking, and some flexible delineators. They're not very expensive. So it's not a huge cost. We're recommending the water-based paint. We're not the thermoplastic, because it's only temporary condition. It can be eradicated much easier. And once the bridge gets replaced, this goes away, and you might just want to mill and overlay the whole area. So again, it's not a major. I mean, I can put together a detailed cost if the board would like that, but it's not going to be a huge change either way.
Not to talk about that one area, but it seems like there might be room to contain like one drum that provides a really strong visual, and there's still room for the bicycles to.
Yeah, we might be able to do a drum there.
Yeah, with the sign. I mean, if there's nothing, then cars are just going to be like, oh.
Either plan is good with Bob's one-way sign on the south side.
Yes,
Yeah.
that would be consistent.
Yeah.
Did you have a question, Sean?
I think it would be helpful just for us in our procurement pricing to get an itemized list of what signs we don't have, or any other features we don't have that we would need to purchase in A and B.
Right.
We have painting capabilities and we can apply water-based paint, we know how to do that.
Right.
But if there's anything we don't have in stock that we would need to buy, we just would need to know what those things are. And if it's just signs, we buy signs all the time, we know what that price range is. That's not an issue. But for instance, I don't know what a temporary speed bump costs.
Yeah, and it all depends on
We get one.
the size, the design. There are manufacturers.
Okay.
The one, I thought I heard Michelle mention bollards. Was there, I'm trying to figure it out, bollards in the middle of the street to stop people from making those U-turns?
Yes, and just to provide some additional separation for
Right.
the bicyclists.
Right.
So there would be probably 5 or 6.
Going down to Haverford Avenue or?
Yeah, instead of having this double yellow line on the north side, it's going to shift over a little bit. You're going to have a double white line.
Okay.
And then kind of in that space, there's going to be
Those flexi bollards,
Yep.
okay, and that should limit people from trying to make U-turns and all that.
Yep, and it'll give you that separation. And again, there's, I forgot to mention, there is some room for the speed humps under that condition as well. And the one thing that is a drawback here with the bike lane being on this side is just when you get to the where the pedestrian crossing is, we have to install a temporary curb ramp for ADA. So that ramp is going to just go into the bike lane. So is that a big deal? Kind of. We can ask the bicyclists.
How steep and severe is it?
It's probably going to come out. It's temporary. It's not fully compliant, but it's probably about 3 to 5 feet.
So on an edge, it's not going to be sloped?
Yes, it will be.
Oh, I mean, not.
They'll be sloped on the sides and sloped down.
As well.
So, I mean, at this point, maybe they can just cut in front of the. They have to cross travel. That's right. The scenario. So that's a drawback, but I don't know if that's severe for the bicycle community.
I don't know if it's
So.
Yeah. All right, so council members, we have a lot of information presented to us.
I just have one.
Oh, you have one more? I'm sorry.
Just one more quick slide, just kind of to recap some of the, I guess, pros and cons. So to the left is kind of what our goals were, and then right on alternative A and B, our goal to reduce the vehicular traffic speeds. There is, if you're heading northbound, there is a chicane following stop sign at Elmwood, so that should be slowing most of the traffic down. I don't have the data, but just based on observations, it seems like most vehicles are slowing down, maybe not everybody. And then alternative B, one of the reasons why we didn't recommend that in the beginning is my concern that after the stop sign, it is a free flow condition, and maybe they don't have that physical measure to slow them down. They're just going to kind of go up and over the bridge and continue on. So unless we do the temporary speed
If
bumps.
cars aren't parked there, I mean, when cars aren't parked there, I agree, it's a free flow. When cars are parked there, I think it's fairly difficult to just free flow because you're coming on the right side of those cars. Plus, it's narrow. There's no limitations.
Yeah,
The
it's
lane
not-
is narrow, it's either under A or B.
Right. So, and then in terms of restricting the southbound travel, both have signage and barriers. The alternative B, we will introduce as flexible delineators. Possibly we can fit a barrel in, as was indicated. The functionality for the bicyclist, southbound under the current scheme, they do have to dismount, cross at 2 different locations going over the bridge. But there is a separate bike area lane for them, or could be provided for them. An alternative B, southbound bicyclists, they should be dismounting and crossing at the bridge because it's not a fully multi-use width. Whether that happens, it probably doesn't happen all the time, especially if there's no pedestrians on the bridge. I don't see a reason why bicyclists would jump off their bikes. Basically, they'd walk it over. But they do have a separate facility that is a little bit easier for them to use. Functionality for pedestrians, both scenarios, they do have 2 potential crossings. The pedestrians have a little bit more flow. It really kind of depends on where they're coming to and coming from. So it's kind of a wash, I think, from the pedestrian aspects. We're trying to make it as safe for them as possible, slow traffic down. So I think both alternatives are pretty comparable in that respect. And reducing the U-turns, alternative A, there's a little bit more ability to block traffic coming southbound at the parking lot driveway. Alternative B, it's a little bit more signage, maybe that 1 barrel, and you have the flexible delineators. So.
Thank you. So, council, is there a general sense of implementing either of these plans versus the current condition? That's my first question. And just picking up, if there's nodding, then the next, which plan would you prefer? Rob?
I would prefer B. I think part of the issue, I understand the rationale for A, but I think part of the issue is that when vehicles are actually on the bridge, they're on the wrong side of the road, so it's as if we're in Ireland, you know. And B solves that problem. So it keeps cars on the right side.
Okay. Anyone else?
Great.
Cindy? Okay, there's a gentleman. Do we have any idea of sort of what it would cost to implement B in terms of purchase of items as well as manpower?
There's not a whole lot to buy. Really, it's the delineators and maybe a few signs.
We're talking about more or less than $10,000.
Oh, less.
Maybe the
I think-
question is there any difference in the premium
Yeah, that's
prices?
really the question,
right? Because they both cost something.
They both cost something, but doing nothing costs nothing. Right, the council wants to do something. I'm hearing overwhelming support for B.
Well, some kind of cost estimate, a clear, like you said, you don't know how much speed bumps are, we don't, you know, it just, I mean, in this moment, we can't ballpark it maybe, but maybe we could go back with more solid numbers if we.
This is more about time than.
Right.
So here's what I'm
Speed
going to
bumps are
suggest.
optional, and maybe we should own some speed bumps anyway, just to have an inventory.
Humps, speed humps.
Movable speed humps.
Humps.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to suggest
Excuse me.
is a motion to amend the agenda to 7A prime, which would be a resolution directing the office to prepare the costs for our next meeting, and then we would vote to approve them and move this forward.
And the speed humps could be something that maybe you kind of hold in reserve, and if traffic is not going as slow as you want over the bridge, maybe then you install them.
Okay, so would someone like to make that motion to amend the agenda?
I just want to, I would like to hear public comment, you know, on.
That's why this is
I
being
see
moved
it's
to
going in.
7A.
So,
Right, so we would
Potentially that
conclude
could
this
affect-
conversation, we would move to public comment, and then we will reconsider this.
okay.
Can I get that motion to amend the agenda?
I so move.
So moved, seconded. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you, Fred. All right, thank you, John. You have another item to discuss with us. Yes.
For the Windsor Avenue proposal, I didn't prepare a presentation, but I will pull up our prior presentation on Windsor Avenue, just for reference. Sorry. So based on our last meeting, I think like in August, we did present some options for what we could do with Windsor Avenue. And consensus was that we would, I believe, further explore the one-way condition along Windsor Avenue and develop a concept plan. So I did submit, not a formal proposal, but kind of a memo with some scope items and some estimated fees that would go along with that. And I believe everybody has that memorandum. It's dated October 30th, 2019.
No, I do not have
No, we don't
Give
have.
this to your email, or,
it. Did not see that.
Wait, am I looking for an email from October or today? I'm sure, no, today or yesterday.
So this letter was sent in October.
That says October.
Oh, it's probably, the date is not changed. This is new, right? I don't know. I'm just telling you, I got it by email. I don't know.
Windsor
Windsor
Avenue,
Avenue cost.
scope and estimated fees.
Yep.
Right.
Sent Monday, the 18th.
2 days ago.
Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't-
So, okay.
Yeah.
So, realizing that the borough is not made of money, and I first scope try to create, at least for this stage of the process, scope that would kind of answer the key questions and really hone in on what was necessary in terms of data collection and analysis. So we weren't spending a lot of money. There may be some secondary questions that we can't answer right away, but what I tried to do in this memo is highlight what I thought based on discussions here with the board and with staff and feedback from the public process back in January, I think it was. What were those key questions? And I tried to develop the scope that way instead of approaching as kind of the typical traffic study evaluating different traffic flows throughout the entire Windsor Avenue corridor and Haverford Avenue. So those questions were, what's the approximate amount of traffic that will be added to Windsor Avenue on the current two-way segments between North Wynwood and Essex Avenue? So basically it's this segment of Windsor Avenue and just a little bit further to the east. So that's really where the change is occurring. So how much traffic are we adding? That's going to be a key question. Another key question is with the fire company being just down off the page under number 3, intersection 3, with these changes in the traffic pattern, what's going to be the impact on the fire station? Response times, their travel routes, and how do we mitigate that if need be? And then jumping back up to Windsor Avenue, what's going to be the traffic control? Like stop signs, always stops. What are we going to have to do in terms of those recommendations? And typically, always stop is based on a traffic volume warrant. And based on my experience, I don't believe that the traffic volumes would most likely warrant that. So we're going to really focus on some of the other criteria to warrant those signal or those stop signs that doesn't require as much data collection, which again I think is going to be a little bit wasteful based on my experience. And then what are the impacts on street parking with whatever alternative we develop on the north side? So based on the parking study and our data, we'll estimate what parking is being impacted on the different block segments. So those, I thought, were the key questions in developing this scope. I think it's a pretty tight scope, and initially when I took the more generic route, putting together the scope, the fee was about double of what I'm proposing with this scope. So I think we were really able to kind of cut down and dig in and answer those key questions. If there are other questions that I'm missing, we can see if what we have will address those questions, or if maybe we need to adjust the scope a little bit.
Could you just state again the streets that would be involved in the study you're proposing?
Sure. It's in the scope under on page 2, but we would be looking specifically at the intersections along Windsor Avenue. We would evaluate North Wynwood Avenue, Dudley Avenue, and Essex Avenue. And that includes traffic counts and analysis. And then for Haverford, along Haverford Avenue, we would look at North Wynwood Avenue, Conway Avenue, and Essex Avenue.
Why would you not evaluate the intersection of North Wynwood and Haverford Avenue? The stop-controlled intersection of North Wynwood and Haverford Avenue. 1 block south of Windsor and North Wynwood.
It's most likely not going to change that much.
Oh,
But
there's almost a more fundamental question than whether or not to evaluate each of the intersections, which is, does the traffic even work in Narberth if you change Windsor Avenue to one way all the way? it's going to have major impact on the stop-controlled intersection, Haverford and North Windsor. Because currently, when that stop-controlled intersection fails, which happens practically every day between 4 and 6 o'clock, the traffic backs up so far, almost to Conway, that people turn right, they go a block northbound, and they turn left on Windsor Avenue, and then turn left again on North Midwood Road. If the intersection if you can no longer travel westbound on Windsor Avenue, then the intersection at Haverford and North Windward Avenue is broken beyond belief, beyond even any kind of option to go anywhere else. So in my mind, I'm kind of, and I have to say that that's just the beginning of a thought, but I've only just seen this document today. I'm the chair of the infrastructure committee. I don't see, this has been available to us. This is something we could have worked through in committee and could have had a discussion about. And I'm sorry to put you in this uncomfortable situation.
It's not uncomfortable. I mean, it's good information to have, good feedback, and that's what we want. I mean, this isn't set in stone. This is for discussion, and getting that feedback. We can certainly add that intersection in. My goal was to kind of keep it as most cost-effective as possible.
I think I want to just provide you with general feedback then. Okay, when we worked with the North Windward Avenue, when we worked with the Norworth Avenue Bridge, there were many community members who weren't involved in the conversation, and some of the basic assumptions about how the bridge is used by pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists, including the U-turn issue with the shops on the could have been discussed and anticipated. And I think that we're once again entertaining a proposal, and this is not personal to you. It's just that we're now looking at a proposal without really any confidence that some of the basic conversations have been had about the conditions. So it's hard to make sense of that on behalf of the public. And I don't know if I'm alone in that. I'd like to know if I might just share my view on that.
Let me call on Gigi and just remind everybody, we don't have to take any particular action.
No,
I understand that.
And you're not alone. And one of the components, we mentioned the fire department. We also have the police department. So if we don't look at this intersection here, this presents another set of issues. I think we were, as Bob said, we were just looking at we were hoping, or maybe requested, sort of a broader perspective. If you look on Windward Road, the next available street to go into Windward or to go back into Norworth and go all the way, or go straight out to Montgomery Avenue is Sabine Avenue. And you've got to go, now we're just, we've said it before, we're just pushing the traffic around the borough as opposed to solving a larger picture piece. So, there, thank you.
Cindy, yes.
So, I guess my comment is more about process and not the specifics of this. So just to kind of review our timeline, we identified Windsor Avenue as a priority in the winter, right?
12 months ago, yes.
Okay, we had the first meeting in August. We sent some real questions. You got them back to us in October. Infrastructure has not seen this at all. Now, we are a year later, we are no further than $12,000 in consulting fees for phase one. I think we, aside from getting into the details of what streets to evaluate, should take a hard look at how we can be pragmatic and get some stuff done. Because this is not helpful now to try to read this at the table when infrastructure, you could have had this in October and November.
We could have helped I think that our committee could have helped the proposal be more overall on target with our goals. And I think you attempted at the last council business meeting, Michelle, to summarize very nicely for us with the process and where we were, and then to come to this question of needing to know if we could have an evaluation of the one-way. That was, and I think we all agreed on that. But then hadn't heard anything since then. I expected to hear back about that.
And then additionally, the last infrastructure committee that I was a part of, Maureen McMahon came and said, I would love to come in, the Conservancy would love to come in and share some grant for stormwater, and we asked, can we please charge to look at that grant?
I think Mr. Gardner's going to give a presentation. I think that this isn't really relevant to what he's trying to present to us. I feel like maybe we should
Well,
just...
no, the question I
I
was
feel like
asking about
maybe
the
we should just...
intersection.
I think he's done the best he can with the information he's been given, and his understanding of what we're looking for, and I think that we should let him finish and then maybe set a conversation for the time for us to discuss what it is that we're looking for.
I guess I'm just saying, I
Agreed.
can't
Yeah, because
comprehend.
I don't want to make you stand
Okay.
there while we do
Let's,
this. That's it.
thank you all. So, hearing no further questions, thank you very much for coming. And we will move on to the next section of our meeting. Public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on any matter that they like. Just, I'll start in the rear, raise your hand, and when you speak, if you're capable of standing up, go ahead and do so, state your name and address. Tom, going down the rear row, the very rear row, okay, coming next, yes, Tom, go ahead.
I'm Tom Henry, I'm with the Norworth Environmental Advisory Council, and you had mentioned the Lower American Conservancy wanted to get involved with Windsor. We would like to get involved with Windsor as well. So as you have further discussions, we would like to be invited to some of those discussions to get our input on how stormwater is going to be addressed on the plans for Windsor. There's flooding issues, there's other issues over there, there's under-designed storm sewers under Windsor, and we would really like to have an input in this whole process. So if you all could consider including us in those discussions, we would greatly appreciate that.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank
I
you.
would suggest that it's never a bad idea to send an EAC representative to the infrastructure committee meetings. Those can, probably every single one of those meetings is an area where your committee can get good information and also during the public comment period offer information.
We would like to, 8 o'clock in the morning is difficult, 3
Okay.
o'clock in the afternoon is as difficult.
Okay.
I was disappointed that we missed the meeting on Monday since you discussed the PRP and the permit, which I had been involved with up until recently. So, yes, you're right, we should be at those meetings. Timing is difficult. We had a meeting at 5:30 Monday evening, so that day was pretty hectic for some of us. So, Aaron, you're absolutely right. We should be at those meetings. We'll try to be at those meetings, but we really would like to be involved, possibly invited when you talk about permits and those types of things, so that we can get our input into the whole process, stormwater, and some other issues in the borough.
So I think there's an opportunity here. Council will be seating a new council in January, electing a president and vice president. Committee chairs will be assigned, and those chairs will then be setting their meeting schedule for the year. And once that chair is seated, it'll be an opportunity to make sure that they are aware of your need, and perhaps the schedule can be made more accommodating for the EAC.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, anyone else in the rear row? All right, moving to Mr. Hawkinson.
Andy Hawkinson, 203 Wayne. I am a neighbor of the Sabine Avenue property, block and a half away, and I understand that there's discussion in council of a request for proposal for consulting services regarding the property. That's a worthy thing to do, but I think I can help the council spend whatever money they are contemplating in a wise way. And I think we have the cart before the horse. Norworth is blessed with a number of real estate professionals that could add, I think, a lot of detail and a lot of wisdom to the process of creating an RFP. And it has been my experience professionally that the more finely you define the scope of work and define the question that you want answered, the cheaper and more worthwhile the product you get is going to be. So to just ask an open-ended question, what do we do with this property, is like writing a blank check. And I've been on the other end of this process a lot. is like writing a blank check to a consultant. Whereas if you sat down and had an advisory group, I would think of people that know a lot about the history of that property and know the neighborhood, that RFP could be refined so that you're getting an answer to specific things that you want to get from an outsider rather than from an insider. I would be glad to participate and to suggest names of people that I think also would be glad to have input on that process. But to spend the money right now, or even to budget the funds in the kind of budget crunch that we're in right now, I think it's premature. And looping back to what Cindy said, it's money that we don't need to spend right away, and we could skip a lot of grief that would go along with the public comment section of that process if we did all that homework beforehand, before the process, the request itself is put out to the public, to put out to the vendors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving down the line. Yes, Amy.
Yeah, hi. Amy Tukowski-Feldman, 208 Forest Avenue. So I did want to thank council for your unanimous vote a little while ago for the resolution committing us to getting to 100% clean energy by 2040. And today I want to voice my very strong support for the EAC's request to allocate funds in the 2020 budget for planning and implementation, for climate planning and implementation. As a citizen volunteer, I'm feeling very aware right now of the challenge that we've taken on and the work that we have ahead of us. But I also feel very strongly that with commitment and with funds earmarked for this and planning, that we're going to discover really great opportunities as we move forward. So I hope you'll go ahead with those funds.
Moving down the line. Yes, Elshak.
Mona Elshaks, 109 Conway in the house. Hi. Again, I want to thank council for your bold commitment to moving to 100% renewable energy by 2040. I also am here voicing support for the EAC recommendations. Transportation and utilities are the largest sources of greenhouse gases, so the 5,000 that's being asked for electrical charging stations for several of them, which might actually, after being reduced by vouchers, actually be even a smaller number, just a couple thousand. I think that's a great opportunity to take advantage of grants. And I know you're coming down to the deadline for budgeting, and I know the timing is tight for all of you. But I think this is a great opportunity with a lot of funding that could be used from other sources that could get a lot of, could be of great value to the community in helping to put the infrastructure in place to move us closer to making it possible for people to purchase electric vehicles. And I also support the idea of working in collaboration with 10 municipalities in Montgomery County who are working together on this idea of moving toward renewable energy by within a couple decades. So I think that money would be well spent for hiring part-time staff to help our overburdened staff who, in a teeny little town like Norworth, they've been doing great work, but they already have their hands full. So I think this money would be well spent. Thanks.
Thank you. That line, sir.
Hi, Joe Toscano, 121 Rockland. Like Amy and Mona, I also wanted to express support for the EAC's request for funding to get us to 100% renewable energy. I think many of the things that they talk about in their request are time sensitive, like the vehicle charging stations and the matching funds for that. And it's time for us to commit the funding to it so that we can achieve these goals. I mean, one of the other things in there that strikes me as particularly important to move towards now is a power purchase agreement so that we can get to that first goal of 100% renewable energy for electricity. So I just wanted to express my support for that as well. One other point in regards to the Norworth Avenue Bridge, as someone who bikes and walks over that bridge a lot, alternative B looked much more attractive. Anything that reduces the need to have pedestrians and cyclists and cars crossing back and forth in front of each other seems fantastic to me. So, thank you.
Jean Borak, I'm at 510 North Essex Avenue. I just want to thank the council for their commitment to the Norworth Avenue redesign, and I think Plan B is a great redesign which prioritizes all the vulnerable road users, and it's more inclusive, and we just want to commend both the traffic engineer and the council for working on that. And also I just wanted to echo Bob's comments about the Windsor Avenue redesign. I think it's really important to get the community feedback early on in the design phase to make sure we get it right. There's a lot of things happening like on the streets that you wouldn't be able to see unless you live around there or are using the roads there. So thank you.
Yeah, Ira Winston, 317 Mary Avenue. I just have one quick logistical question about the bridge. How does all this changes work with snow removal? Because I've seen a lot of issues with these speed bumps and snow removal, and we wind up just like ripping them off.
For these speed humps, what I would recommend is a temporary speed hump, so they can be bolted into the ground.
You take them off?
Yeah, you take them off for the winter. You know, the borough's feeling a little bit, feels like gambling. Maybe they can put them back down after a snow event and then pull them up. Or they could just pull them up for the winter months.
Yeah, but how about all those other, because there's a lot of other structures you're putting in place. I mean, who's gonna, all of a sudden, things you used to like plow are gonna be hand shoveled?
Yeah, I'll have to talk to Public Works about the path, the protected pedestrian bike area. The roadway vehicular area should still be able to be plowed. They just need to go a little bit slower. Those the barrels are at least the barriers are mostly filled with water, so they are weighted down. So hopefully that would hold them in place.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll come back to you. Moving to the front row.
Krista Staub, Friends of Sabine Park. Just 2 points that I'd like to make clear about the current RFP for 201. The first one is, if this is going to be happening, we would like to, and I'm noticing on your agenda, the action items that you have Norworth Borough zoning code. This is something that we can consider, that we would like to consider for 201, that we would like to have the same footprint of 201. Additionally, if we're going forth with this, we would like a conservation and easement on Sabine Park. I'd like to also really make clear to the infrastructure committee, specifically members of the committee, that you were brought into this borough council through residents of Norworth, and that you're here to represent us. So you need to listen to us.
Thank you. Mr. Ridgway?
Yeah, just another bridge question. Ed Ridgway, 155 Marion. With the current configuration and the Plan A, the pedestrians are all on the east side of the bridge.
Correct.
And so when they get across, if they're coming south to north, when they get across and they're in town, they then cross back over on that crosswalk.
They can cross the crosswalk, or they can continue on to the signal that have for across there.
Okay.
So they have two locations.
Right, but the reason that kind of diagonal crosswalk suggested to be made diagonal is so that people could cross there.
Yes, and the reason we were recommending it to kind of be adjusted more on a diagonal was to, one, be able to better accommodate a curb ramp for pedestrian, for handicap access, and it also kind of improves the sight line just a little bit.
Right, and get a little farther from the bridge. Right. Yeah, so I was wondering in configuration B, when the pedestrians are all on the west side, why do you even need that diagonal? Why would you even want to have a crosswalk there and suggest that people cross up by the bridge? Because there's nobody going to be crossing to that spot.
They could. If you're coming out of the dance studio building, if a pedestrian just kind of walks up on that side of the road from
I would lose that. I think I would lose that because I wouldn't put anything to direct people to cross up close to the bridge. I mean, I guess right now, traditionally, I don't remember if there was anything before the reconfigurations of the bridge. I don't remember if there was any crosswalk there. I think there was nothing there. And so, I guess a mixture of people would walk down the hill and cross at the intersection or just cross at whatever spot they felt safe. But I just wouldn't suggest people cross at the top.
Thank you for that. Yes, Ms. Porter.
Ed got my comment. I question that. And I also support the budget request from the EAC.
Your address, Ms. Porter.
Oh, 415 Conway, sorry.
Thank you, that's all right. Just taking a note here. Okay, we have one more public comment in the back corner, sir, thank you.
My apologies for batting out of order here first, council meeting I've been to. My name is Joe Lopez, 207 Elm Terrace, and I'm coming here tonight to talk a little bit about, conservation, so to speak. Conservation, or preservation, that is, in regards to Sabine Park, and to kind of piggyback on the staff's comments and Mr. Hawkinson's comments. I know there's an RFP for a consultant out there. I think maybe we look a little more locally as far as what will work the community, or what will work best for the community. I think, and I can speak for a number of neighbors who couldn't be here tonight on Elm Terrace, Wayne Avenue, Sabine. I haven't met someone yet who disagrees with the following, with maybe for the zoning, to maintain the current zoning. Whatever's there along that strip there, let's no bigger, no taller. Let's keep it the same. We want to improve it, all for it. Let's make it better, let's make it safer, especially if there's going to be a school there, children. The other is an easement on the park. A lot of us have families, a lot of us have budding families, and there are people there with young kids coming in. I don't think they want to see that park go. And I know it was mentioned that everyone would like to keep it a park, but as the residents and neighbors of the area, we're just looking to Borough Council to have a little more of a firm commitment to that. For lack of a better term, get some reassurances that, okay, it's not just part of the blunt phrase, lip service. We would like to maybe have some more reassurances, some easements made, something like that. And we'd be invited to more, or be considered for more of these type of meetings that would be happening. I found out about this on Sunday, about the meeting on Monday, would have loved to have been there. It was in Virginia the whole day. Thank you very much for providing the avenue for us to come here tonight to kind of voice our opinions. And if you need a listing of people who would back up what I had to say, I could probably get that to you in a matter of a week. So well, not everyone can physically be here. I know it's a big deal to all the people who live on those streets, and probably many, many more if you actually put it to their opinion.
It's a sort of general policy. We don't sort of entertain anyone who stands up and says, I'm speaking for other people who are not in the room, just because you understand why.
Understood.
And I think we, if neighbors sort of collectively have a particular interest or would like to make a statement, I think petition may be a strong word given where we are in the process, but some sort of statement signed by neighbors would be very helpful for us.
I think it would be nice to have the addresses so we could communicate to them, so they could understand.
Name and address.
If you could send that list, I think that'd be really helpful, so that we could communicate to you actually what's going on, so that it's not rumors, and you actually know what's happening. I think that'd be great for you to understand.
I found out about something on Sunday night, and we're looking to get a little more insight as to what's happening, because, listen, there's no, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of businesses out here. I see a lot of for rent signs, down around this area.
We heard comments Monday, basically, that were sort of distortions of what people thought council was doing. And it was really sad that as people were speaking that way, they just didn't have the information. And so it would be great to be able to get that information out to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Fred, you had a thought?
Yeah, I just want to say we had about 10 people come to the infrastructure meeting and who were interested in the issue. And it wasn't really on our agenda. So we want to make sure that you're there when we're actually talking about the issue and you're not just wasting your time listening to stormwater discussions, which are important for us, but not what you're here for. So I think better communication will make sure that you're in the room when it's being discussed. We'd like to make sure that
When are we
happens.
posting committee agendas now? How many days in advance? generally a week in advance, the committee agendas are posted on the website, so it's another place to look.
And a friendly reminder, the emails go out weekly on the flash, the Norworth Civic Association posts it on Facebook. So there are multiple ways for you as a citizen to understand when we're meeting and what the topics are.
Rob?
I have two brief emails that came to us I'd like to enter into the record, if I may.
That would be great.
Okay, from Jim Spear, 321 Grayling. I am in support of Norworth taking appropriate steps in budgeting to help implement the forthcoming climate action plan. In my opinion, borough budgeting investment will be necessary to help us transition to a post-carbon economy. Also from Luis Gugliano and Jean DiSabatino. Having lived in Norworth for 42 years, I am so happy to see Norworth pursuing action on climate. There is no reasonable way we can overlook how important this is for our community and for the future of our residents. We must act where we have control to address this worldwide problem. If we don't, then who will? Funding this effort will be evidence that we know what is important and that we have taken action as a responsible community.
Thank you. I did receive a number of other emails which will be entered into the record in support of same. Hearing no other public comment, I will close public comment. We move to 7A prime. Can I get a motion for a resolution to ask the office to prepare final plans and costs to implement biking plan B for the Norworth?
So moved.
Okay.
Do you want to have an amendment?
Well, I can only suggest a motion. You guys have to make
I
it.
said so moved. So if someone
Well, why don't you put it on the table and then we'll
Wasn't
amend.
really what you were, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so moved. Is there a second?
Can you repeat what you said? Maybe I
Second.
missed
Second, which resolution to ask the office to prepare costs and details, time frame to implement alternative B.
it. I would make a friendly amendment that move that we instruct the office to implement Plan B without the crosswalk, without the bridge.
To prepare the plan, not including
No.
the crosswalk at the top of the bridge.
Okay.
Well, everybody's nodding.
Sure.
Do you accept this amendment?
Absolutely, I accept the amendment.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
accept the amendment.
the request is now for the office to put together a
Good idea.
timeline and costs for alternate B minus the crosswalk.
I wasn't asking the office to put together a timeline of costs for us to vote on. I was asking the office to implement it, period, without.
Okay, well,
That was my amendment.
okay, one amendment at a time. We've made a change to the plan. Now, let's talk about timeline. Would you like to have them prepare the costs, or would you just like them to do it?
Well, my motion was to instruct
Wait,
the office to
right.
do it without the crosswalk.
That was your request.
I don't know
I
if there's a
I withdraw my motion.
Great.
Can I just, but we,
Move to table?
with someone, or I move to table my motion
Is there a
so that
second?
we can entertain.
All in favor of tabling?
Okay.
Table. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's tabled. Michelle, make a motion, and I have a question for our borough manager.
Okay, I move that we request that the office move forward to implement Plan B without the crosswalk at the top of the bridge, as expeditiously as possible.
I second that.
Second, okay. Mr. Metrick, where would the money to make this change come from?
Well, there'd be labor costs. We would be doing a lot of the work in-house. That's an opportunity cost. That's not a cost that's over and above what we've already budgeted for that labor. It's just dedicating it to other things. Traffic control devices are reimbursable under Highway 8, so I'd want to get as much Highway 8 dollars working for us on these items as possible. And I didn't hear anything, John, in your presentation that sounded that it wasn't a traffic control device. Bollards, speed bumps, signs, and even paint's reimbursable under Highway 8. So it would be, I believe it would be a Highway 8 expenditure.
Great. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Thank you. All right, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
Move the Borough Council for the minutes of the October 2nd, 2019 workshop meeting and the October 16th, 2019 business meeting of Borough Council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any comments on the minutes? No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Schedule of bills, Council Rickards.
I move the Borough Council approve the schedule of bills of the general highway, aid, sewer, and solid waste funds and authorize the borough manager to pay all bills.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay, thank you.
But maybe someone from the committee.
And any discussion on the bills? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye, sorry.
7C.
I move the Borough Council adopt Resolution 2019-030 for the attachment for the purchase of the right-of-way Norworth Avenue Bridge. This is one of those easement purchases.
Okay, is there a second? Fred, seconded. And any discussion?
Sean, if you could just give us the recap of the cost and the timeline and all that, sort of just once over, if you give us the Reader's Digest version.
Yeah, well, if you hold me to Reader's Digest, the cost is around $9,800 for the purchase of permanent right-of-way around and surrounding what is now the ballet studio on North Norworth Avenue. It's property located in Lower Marion Township. The price has been negotiated. There was one back and forth. We settled on the price that's well within our, very, very close to our appraised value. We're happy with that. If council approves this resolution, this will be the third of the 6 properties we need to acquire in order to pave the way, literally, for the construction of the Norworth Avenue Bridge. The other 3 are 3133 North Norworth Avenue, which is the 2 businesses south on the hill in Lower Marion as well. A purchase from the National Railroad Corporation, Amtrak, for larger foundations, and the foundation plan was just approved by PennDOT. That's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
And the last easements, the last purchase still out there is 198 Elmwood. There's a sliver of the front of that property that has to be purchased in a permanent grading easement as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 7D.
I move the Borough Council approve the 2020 operating budget amendments.
Could you list those amendments? All right, we got a second.
Wait, we need a, wait a second.
Yeah, all right, let's put it on the table and let's choose amendments.
Second, I second.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, Mr. Metrick.
Thank you. As we agreed to our process on how we were going to go about amending the budget, I was collecting email requests and also working on things internally. So as you look at your spreadsheet that you all should have a copy of, it looks like this.
I need a bigger title.
The cells that are shaded gray, we have another action item on council with regards to solid waste bid that we'll get to that'll affect some of these numbers. The draft 2020 budget number is in the column labeled draft 2020 budget. The amended budget number is the number suggested by, in the case of staff, I'll go through the shaded ones and then you have the net change. Let's jump right to number 3, the Norworth Fire Company operating expense count for 11,100. Draft budget had 83,747 in it. That number now is 35,647 for a net reduction of 48,100 based upon the additional information the Norworth Fire Company sent us and we've received between the last time we spoke. And so that's just an administrative change to that number. Line item number 4, real estate taxes. After we met last, we got, actually literally the next day, we got our report from the county of our estimated assessed value of all borough property. It increased $2 million. Therefore, at the tax rate that was proposed in the draft budget, that would yield $20,000 of additional revenue. And since that's an income item, I switched the plus minus sign on that so that you could, at the end of the day, sum up that column of net change to understand how much of the gap has been closed. All other items, 5 through 12, were items sent to us via email. Those should be discussed by council.
Okay.
Those were brought up, and those have simply been entered into the spreadsheet in the same fashion. So draft 2020 budget, whatever that number was, the amended budget, and then the net change. In summary, the changes in this budget close the funding gap roughly a little more than $100,000. That's a little higher than the spreadsheet I sent around to you earlier because I had a miscalculation in there that I corrected in having to do with number 6, Narberth Fire Company houseman salary related payroll accounts. I was using an incorrect number to adjust that, and I used the correct number in this spreadsheet, so the closure is a little bit greater. Remember that in our draft budget we had an increase of roughly $41,000 in income compared year over year, and we had a net increase of $218,000 of expenditures year over year. So we had about a $170,000 gap. These amendments taken in total close that gap by $100,000.
All right. Let's start at the top and start working down. So I'm going to go number 3, Norworth Fire Company.
Sure.
Since
So
we'll discuss solid waste.
yeah, can I?
Go ahead.
Public safety had a conversation that changed the numbers. That Fran Dixon was here. We did ask the fire company to go back last week and see if they could fill in some blank information that was missing, and they did provide it. My recommendation, I'd like to hear from the other committee members, is that we remain at the same goal as last year for the amount of funding given to the general operating budget. And the rationale being, of course, that they have larger reserves than the borough does. And so while I understand the money and the differences that they brought to us, I'm sorry, can you just give me 1 second? I understand that. I think that the dollars that we are obligated as a borough to provide for them is appropriate at this time, and that those dollars would be zero. That's what I'm recommending.
So my question is, Judy, public safety came up with a list of questions, and then most of them were answered. But the one that was not, which you said, the fire company has a large reserve. I did not see that provided in the
Sure.
answers. Do we know what that is and what it's in reserve for? You may not know.
I don't know. So we didn't come up, I mean, we didn't originate the document. That came from Lower Merion. It's used like sort of across Montgomery County as some sort of financial assessment of each fire department. So we looked at it and made it our own, switching some things around. And we've been working with that for a number of years, 3 years maybe. And every year there has been information missing, and every year it's been late. And that's no different than this year. It was late, missing information, and we had to go back. Sean and I started that conversation with the firehouse in the summer, having that discussion with Fran and Mr. Henderson regarding if they had any questions about the document or anything that we needed to do. They seemed to be on board, and again, we were sort of missing the information. The idea of the reserves has, I can't speak to the exact number. I don't know because they're not willing to provide that information. So that's what's happening. So they did include the number of what they got from
fundraising.
the fundraising. Thank you, from fundraising. Yeah, but we don't have a clearer picture.
So,
But it is
actually,
asked in those documents.
I'm going to suggest actually that I ask Mr. Metrick to just go over sort of our timeline in terms of budget here, so that we understand sort of what our pulses are as we march towards the end of the year, right? We have a motion on the table here to amend the budget based on these requested amendments, and then how do things move forward from there?
There's still more work to be done on the budget on the staff side, so we'll be having this conversation and process and vote again in 2 weeks, when hopefully there'll be more changes to be made. I already have some administrative changes that to the benefit of closing that gap that are coming from health insurance issues. We also have some unresolved variables that might get resolved in the next 2 weeks, namely the pending arbitration with the FOP on the police contract. That could affect our budget numbers for 2020. So this process will continue again in 2 weeks, and with the hope that when we get to our December business meeting, we have either no or very few major things to discuss and amendments to make, and we can make a motion and adopt a budget at that meeting that works for the borough, and we can move on without having to schedule another special meeting. That's the intention.
Okay, so I might suggest we have an opportunity to request the information, any other information that we might want from the fire company.
So I just want to be clear that we didn't come to a decision at the public safety meeting at that moment because, and so the committee asked that we discuss it tonight at this meeting when it was available. And to your question, it has been requested 3 times. I don't feel we're going to get that answer. So my recommendation stands.
I have a question. Of the total fire department budget, what portion of that does the borough provide to them?
What's required?
No, what portion of their total budget do we fund at this time? Because this looks as if this
zero.
Well,
to the operating budget.
Yeah. Right. In kind. I mean, I think that's.
Did you want to see? Well, that's what I guess the next question is. Would it be helpful for the rest of council to see those documents?
This appears as if what we're giving to the fire department is $35,000, and I think we actually. I want it to be clear that the borough actually funds our fire department very and supports our fire department significantly, and that's important to us.
Right.
That this is not
we're not leaving them, without a home and equipment, and we're not.
That's just the point.
Right. Well, I think that's where looking at this line, if we add up these line items, which Mr. Mitchell, you probably have this in Excel on your computer. What would be this total there?
This is not a question of whether we really want to fully support the fire department.
No. We do fully support them.
I understand. So let's assume that line 141,100 is 0 because that's what it's been in prior years.
That's right.
What would be this total?
Where am I?
All the 141.
Got it. Sorry.
141.
Sorry.
That's the question you're asking.
That's what he's asking. It's like 4 pages. It's like
There's a breakdown.
Total services by department, page.
Oh, there we go. That's
fire company, 372,000.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's like additional.
And then when we add our 35, we're.
No.
Is that including the
No.
8746?
You have to subtract the 83.
Take out the 83.
So it looks like last year it was 279,541.
Right. But the additional, right.
And note, that does not include the house itself.
Right, it does
So
not.
it's really
Right.
more than that.
So my next question was going to be to Mr. Metrick to put in the documents that we've requested that it would be helpful to council. And was it the public safety committee gets it? Thank you. I think that might be helpful.
The houseman salary is included in that.
Yeah, it is.
I can't find it.
So we're talking about $30,000 over more than $300,000.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the delta that
Yeah.
we're talking. Yeah, okay.
Does that mean the support involves liability insurance, dental benefits, health insurance? Just so people know, unemployment insurance, houseman's wages. There's I mean, so people sort of get a gist.
Yeah, it's not that it's zero.
Several $100s.
It's the additional dollars, right.
The request is for operating expenses.
That's right.
And the request that council has always made is like, okay, well, we need to see these things pertaining to your operating budgets and assets and things. And that information is something that I'm hearing so hasn't been forthcoming. And so therefore, we feel that we should keep the other support in place.
That's right.
But
not provide the additional dollars. Thank you.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
John Walco addressed this in a previous email. Under Pennsylvania Borough Code, section 120256, it requires the borough, quote, shall require any emergency services organization receiving borough funds to provide the borough with an annual itemized listing of all expenditures of funds before the borough may consider budgeting additional funding to the organization. So if the fire company hasn't complied with that requirement, then statutorily the borough can't consider budgeting additional funding.
So So the funding that is built into all of the line items except for 141,100
That's right.
represents a 3.5% increase over last year. Okay. So it is the recommendation of the chair of public
That's
safety
right.
that the committee did not make a decision.
No, they did not. Because we didn't have the information.
That line item 141,100 be set at 0.
Mhm.
So we're sort of in a budget motion
Yep.
here. So I'm going to try and build a
Yeah, go
package
back.
of accepted amendments. So is that accepted, that number remain at 0 as it was last year?
So rather than the 35 of the
Mhm.
here?
No.
Thank you, now
Well,
I'm.
okay.
Okay.
Great, original.
No, 35.
Okay. Okay.
So that's an additional proposed savings, that bring this 100,000
Yes,
down
it
to
is.
70.
Yes. Yes. Sorry for the confusion.
Okay.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. All right. Next, we go to real estate taxes. That doesn't need to be discussed. We just take the money. Norworth Library. You had some discussions during F&N.
We did. So Linda came and actually talked through her budget. And I think what's just important to look at is 2018, 2019, and 2020. So in 2018, So in 2018, the request for the budget was 230 and change. And they requested an increase because we transferred employee benefits from the borough to the library. So the cost of that was
Which is a burden
$1,000
to
more.
them. Yeah.
Okay. The next year for 2019, they requested about the same, 229, right? They eliminated 2 full-time employees, they decreased some approaches. We cut 10% from that request and approved about 207,000.
Right.
The borough transferred the liability insurance to the library that cost about $3,000. So they, no, it was an additional liability. Right, an additional liability. Yeah. So the borough provides liability like the umbrella insurance, but then they suggested, hey, you should probably insure your individual library. And they did that for personnel for about $3,000. So then the budget request now is about 234. So they added that from their 2019 request. So the draft budget is around $235,000. The amended budget is 186 at about a $48,000 loss cut again.
From their request, not
From
from last
their,
year.
correct.
Okay.
Well, so from last year, it's, I don't know, somebody do that math. 207 minus, it's
10%.
But basically, their request is about 235. The amended budget that currently is in front of us is 187.
Yeah.
Council needs to decide whether they would like to use 187 or go somewhere in the middle or give them the money they requested. Fred?
What does this represent for the library? What do they have to do to get to 187?
You mean how do they make up that money? What specific cuts would they make?
Well, I mean, if you're cutting 2 full-time employees last year, I mean,
Yeah, we didn't ask how they would make up for that loss.
so this was your number that you gave to the library? You said, we think this is more, I mean, who came up with 187?
Sean came up, I did
No,
not.
I did not.
No, I'm sorry.
This is a suggestion
Hold on.
by council members sent to.
Go ahead, Gigi.
Go. So a few years ago, I want to make it really clear. The library and the fire department are charitable organizations. They're allowed to raise their own funds, write grants, which they do. When Mr. Cilio was here, we were trying to bring the budget back online. If we had continued on the path of paying the library and the fire department even more, but the library at that time, along the path that was set by the previous borough manager, we would today be paying the library $145,000 plus, considering all of the insurance and additional things we were providing. So it was an excessive amount of money. And there was a course set to make a correction to bring these sort of back in line. And in that time, we were also giving funds out to other organizations without a process, but we still don't have a very clear process. We still don't have guidelines and all those kinds of things. We do use these papers that come from the county for the library and the fire department as guidelines, and they happily provide as much information as they can. Back to Mr. Cilio. he decides, we make the decision that at some point we're going to have to start stepping down what we can offer because the borough doesn't have reserves. And currently in documents provided by the library, they continue to have, I think, close to a $300,000 reserve, which the borough does not. So it is our decision to decide, to come up with what's an appropriate number. The library is allowed under state funding to apply for 16% of a grant from the state. They apply for just under that consistently. They should go for the whole schmagegi, in my opinion. I'm not suggesting that, if the library came and said they had to cut programming, that this would be our course of action, but they are an independent charitable organization, and so perhaps if we continue with the process that we're using with the papers and submitting the documents, and further on in this budget, we'll have that conversation about smaller organizations are going to need our help too. And I think that we have to have some kind of clear process with deadlines, guidelines, all kinds of things in order to help the organizations and not just these two. So I would suggest that we continue on course and cut the budget again.
That answers your question.
Well, I mean, if they have this reserve, but they chose apparently not to draw it down, but instead to let go employees last year. So that doesn't sound like they have a lot of money that they're just sitting on.
Well, what's a lot of money, Fred?
I would suggest, Fred, we don't know why employees were let go. I mean, there's various reasons one might restructure.
You're repeating what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yeah, just one point of clarification from our finance meeting earlier. We heard from the library that the state aid is contingent on level funding from the borough, so that the cuts would be actually larger than what's proposed. We would see an additional $15,000.
He said that, but notice that they were cut last year and they still did receive the $15,000 state grant, so I'm not sure.
Maybe a complicated formula.
Contingent,
Okay.
not clear, maybe
So-
more complex.
Does the library have some specific plan that they're kind of capital initiative that they're saving for and that therefore?
So they have $200,000 listed in a cash account, and then they have $100,000 in our capital campaign. That's how they've allocated resources.
So there's a cash account and a capital fund. So I guess I'm just thinking as a kind of a taxpayer, and like for taxpayers, the borough, I'm not sure what the borough's current, cash reserves are, but I mean with the current capital fund.
Don't say.
I guess it's the question that I would ask as a taxpayer is like, okay, so are you going to fund the capital? Are you going to fund the capital fund of the library, the fire department, or of the borough at large for general expenses that the borough incurs? And I think and then if you're funding a not-for-profit organization that's run separate from the borough, how do you determine that you should be taxing for that revenue? I just think it's a
quagmire.
It's not clear to me that we should be doing that. That that's wise to do that. Yeah.
So I don't know that it's our place to sort of tell the fire company or tell the library what we think is an appropriate cash reserve for them.
I'm talking about the appropriateness of taxing.
That's where I was leading.
That's what we're saying.
That's exactly where I was leading. But it is appropriate for us to sort of form our opinion as a body and fund them accordingly, recognizing what it takes to get that money. Right. I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay.
I just don't want those organizations to feel like, we're sort of judging it on its face. It's not our job to get into their business of how they run their organization.
Okay. I'm just if it were only capital funds, I would say we can't. I think we want to support them in holding on to their capital funds.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you're talking about a decrease of about $20,000 from last year's assignment, which would draw down their cash reserve 10%. We would be sort of making that decision to either cut services or they choose to draw into their reserve. That's their choice to make. But that's what's currently on the table, Fred.
Okay. I mean, is the library budget available for us to see some of these documents that they've got?
Yes.
I'm very...
It's on the this.
Okay.
But for some reason, mine doesn't fill in, that's not very good.
I think it doesn't show up in the preview. You have to open it.
These cells don't
It's
fill in.
something like that.
Right, I don't know why.
It did to me, the fire department as well, and I was missing a page or something, but yeah.
So could I suggest, I mean, my friend looks at this, rather than, so, okay, we're reducing them this year $48,000, so what's that, like 12% of their assets, 15% of their assets, right? Could we do a step down to say, to kind of soften the burden here of $10,000, you know, get them up to, or what, 187 now, 197? Do more of a step down so it's not as dramatic?
We absolutely could do that. Is there a will at the table to do that?
Was there a rationale for that specific number?
Because there needed to, when we looked at the total budget, we looked at planning for the CIP, there was some conversation about providing funds that way to reserve our own dollars to go, as Bob suggested, go into the larger capital improvements. At that time, that was the conversation.
Which I guess the library will benefit from too, because then we make capital improvements to the library itself.
Right.
And we would fund those.
Right.
If they were,
Well, the security piece, we've talked about all that stuff,
I
right?
guess if we were to do a major capital fund improvement to the library building itself, we would
It's really, and it's completely independent of this decision.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So I hear an idea of bringing that up to 197. I'm going to need to look for some nods here. You know what, Fred, take your time. Let's skip to a simpler item, and then we'll come back, and then you'll have an opportunity to look at what you want.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's talk about the houseman's salary. Mr. Metrick, can you summarize that small decrease?
No? I'm good. You good?
Go ahead,
Sure.
Gigi.
The houseman salary, Pennsylvania state law says that we have to provide housemen, which are people who maintain the property of the fire companies. And the decision was made a number of years ago to the housemen become borough employees. And along with Mr. Cilio's plan of reduction and cost savings, we decided to cap the houseman's salary. I believe it was at $60,000, and then an agreement was made with the fire company that anything increases, excuse me, in salary for the housemen would be covered by the Norworth Fire Department. We've covered them. They're on the health plan for borough employees. They're on are they on the pension plan?
Correct.
So they have,
Non-uniformed, yeah.
yes, so they're on the non-uniform employee pension plan. They do receive other benefits from the borough, and it was just a cap to say, and it's done throughout Pennsylvania and other boroughs where there's a cap, and then the difference is made up by fire companies. In some boroughs, the fire company pays for every houseman. It just depends on how it was formulated.
Okay. So it's just a slight decrease,
Slight decrease.
based on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Based on the cap.
Everybody is comfortable with that? All right, moving on. Let's talk about, I'm trying to pick an easy one here. Fred, how you doing?
Yeah, okay. All right,
You're okay?
If you want to come back. So
Yeah, let's come back to
You know,
it.
I should say disclosure, we're power users of the library, you know, we're in there all the time.
Yeah.
I'm very uncomfortable.
I guess my question is, to just maybe, are we back to the library?
We're back to the library.
I don't think, it's true, they're a charitable organization, they can raise funds, and they do. They have quite a few fundraisers year and I expect them to
People do.
continue. They kind of have their act together, the board does stuff, and they give us information, and it's accurate, and like, they run themselves pretty well. I'm guessing that like, any libraries that are like totally self-sufficient, it's like unheard of without public dollar support. I don't know.
I would agree.
You would agree? I don't know.
There are a few.
I don't think they're rare.
It's sort of unimaginable.
There are a few, but not a lot.
Private endowment.
A private endowment,
Yes.
or in a public library, you know, to be, I don't think, I mean, I think that there is some level of public support that's simply required if you want to have a library.
Yes.
I don't know what that's supposed to be. Like, I don't have clue, one. If reduce it 10% a year until there's nobody left in there, is like, that's not like a
I'm sorry. The intention was never to keep reducing them to 10 for 10 and 10. That was not the intention. The intention was to go to 20, hold, see where everyone was, reduce by 20, see where everybody was at, and then get on to the next set, which is all of you are going to have to figure out what you're going to do for your budget and going forward. It was the plan, a 4 or 5 year plan to make those reductions to fund part of the CIP. So it is not forever we'll be reducing them at 10%. Also, throughout the land, and Ambler Borough is the one I always point to, they make these decisions, and this is what I've been asking Mr. Muterick and Mr. Walco and Cindy Rickards and Sean to put on the table the boundaries of gift giving based on the dollars the borough actually has in its own reserves, the financial health and prediction of the borough. So Ambler Borough has 2 libraries. They give $10,000 to the library entity, the overarching, and then they decide what they're doing with the money. They do the same thing sort of with their fire department. And they just know what the dollar amount is based on their taxation, what comes in, and what they have obviously paid out. But it's a standard gift with a little variation, obviously, over time. But I would suggest that we move towards that going forward with council because of the help and because we have other projects the borough would like to get to, as we're hearing from members of the public. And smaller organizations will come forward and request dollars as well. So it's going to be quite...
I don't know anything about Ambler's library's finances. I don't know if the $10,000 gift is the only public support they receive, or the library
It's what they receive from the government.
are
Yeah.
employees of the borough. I don't know.
They're not.
I don't know how it runs. That's remarkable. I guess my point is I'd like to learn more. It's 9:10. We're not,
Yeah.
I'm not
Not
going
gonna
to
do it
find out,
now,
but
right.
I would like to understand this better before, maybe, certainly before next year. So maybe we can figure out what the resources are to sort of know where the sweet spot is for public support. Because it's not like a gift to it. I mean, the library is an important public institution. Right? They give a gift
Absolutely.
back to the community. Like,
Absolutely.
So
Well,
I just want to be
much-
mindful that we don't
Sure,
put
but-
too much financial pressure on
I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to say that any of us don't support having a public library. I mean, I think we're all really, I agree with Fred. It's like one of the more important institutions that we all use, and we really want to support it. And I think it's maybe got lost with the fire department discussion. It's like we do support the library in that we provide a really excellent building. We repointed it. We restored it several years ago. We built some, they may have funded their addition actually years ago. And I think going forward, the borough, I imagine, well, I know we're committed as a council to continue to support the library's existence. If they didn't have a cash reserve, I would be arguing for let's fully fund their budget.
Absolutely.
I would be like saying, well, sure, why aren't we funding them? Well, the borough doesn't have a cash reserve. They do. So I think that's where
the intent.
that's where I'm struggling. And I agree with you. I'd like to know more too.
So, just to offer a
Google's
little
your friend.
historical perspective, and then we hopefully can make a decision on library. Over the past, 15 years, the borough was contributing increasingly large amounts to the total percentage of the library budget, and it was recognized that that was not sustainable, that the day would come when the borough was paying for 100%. There was conversation at the council table about what it would take to pump the brakes in a healthy way to support the library, support their mission, support their contribution to the community, but to recognize that any healthy organization needs to diversify its income streams and not necessarily rely on one single funder. I think that has been the transition we've seen over the past maybe 3 years when that started to come into effect. I hear that where your recommendation is to continue this.
But then review and hold next year, it's up to
So
you
I'm
next year.
gonna say, how many council members are okay keeping this at the recommended budgeted, amended amount of $186,685?
Is that the recommended
That's
number?
what you, that's the amended.
Good with the recommendation.
That's the amended amount that is currently on the table,
Okay, but then there was also another number.
196.
Well, I would say I want to keep it, I would be very comfortable keeping it what they got last year, which I think is 206.
That's my
That is my, yes. That it still represents, by this budget, a drawdown on their cash expenses, but,
Okay, 206. That's what's currently on the table. Is there a majority?
Opposed.
Just give me some hands.
Yeah.
206, okay. All right, I'm gonna put down 206.
I'm willing to discuss this again if we
said
feel
206.
needs. That's what I'm
He
comfortable
said
with.
last, what he
Keep
got
it the
last
same,
year.
206, 428.
No, 207, 428
207, 428.
is what they got last
Thank
year.
you. Thank you. All right. I'm going to put all these together, and then we're going to take an amendment to the person who introduced the motion, and then once we're done. Okay. Moving on to number 7, economic development account and funds for NBA.
Do you want me to explain that?
Please do.
Okay, so we discussed this, this is just semantics at this point. The information officer, $12,000 account is being phased out when the communication plan is transferred and implemented by Michelle Cower, and now this is part of her job description, so that left $12,000. FNA proposed, and you will have a resolution before you next month, to transfer that $12,000 to the NBA, the Norworth Business Association. When we first got the budget, that line item was put in with recreation and special events. And I just asked Sean, the recreation and special events is largely like the summer camps and stuff. And what I just asked was, can we extract that? Because they are two very distinct things. So us saying, as a council, we support the public good of a thriving downtown economic development, as reflected in our comp plan. So that's all this new line item is. So it's not an addition of money, it's just extracting it from what you see.
Plus 12 minus 12.
Okay, so that's,
So that's all.
so that's 7 plus 8. Everybody
Right.
understands that?
Yes,
Okay.
right.
Moving on to number 9, volunteer firefighter tax credit, which is connected to motion 7G, which is on the table for this evening. And I think we discussed at the prior meeting that when council originally discussed adopting this ordinance, there was an intention for firefighter service in 2018. If they qualified with the point system, to allow for a credit on the 2019 property taxes. Due to a typo, that did not happen. This is the opportunity for council to basically correct that and say, yes, that is where we wanted to support. And those firefighters, when they sort of do their taxes for next year, would get sort of a one-time last year plus this year. And then we move on. The reason it's here in the budget is because there's a budgetary implication, right? We didn't spend any money this year. We would be spending twice the normal amount next year, assuming that the same number of people qualify. The budgeted amount was sort of the high number. We'll see who actually submits. Any conversation, any issues, questions? Should we keep it in here? It's an increase of $3,400 to the budget.
Yes.
Okay,
Well, I'm going to say no,
okay.
because I don't like to go back. I'm a go forward, not a go back human in my life. I was opposed to it then, I'm opposed to it now, but for a different reason now. We actually have another line item that's close to $5,000 that benefits, that also, it's a pretty close number. I think going back, I think receiving the benefit and the benefits that are to come, that are currently in the State House being discussed and possibly passed, the number of benefits that the firefighters, volunteer firefighters would receive next year or in 2021 would be significant and would have a direct impact on our finances here, should you all choose to adopt them. But the question is every time I said this to Fran, we play this game with the fire department of, we give it over here, we chip it back over there, you get it, and we chip it back again, and then so sort of this game going on with small amounts of money in this particular category.
Okay. So hearing that there's a little dissent at the table, I need to get a sense, is there a majority to support or oppose this tax credit? I get sort of a straw vote here. Am I putting this in or am I taking
What was
it
the
out?
5,000, the other 5,000?
So I was looking at the EV charging station. So this is kind of like to the larger conversation. So when there are these asks being put into the room, it's a broader conversation, and it will impact the overall budget, and whether we're raising it by millage rates or percentages, you choose the number you want. It all adds up in the end. And I have been in this room where the discussion on the last day of the year, 2 years in a row. Remember that? We were here having a conversation and going through every single line item and deciding what the tax rate would be just literally 24 hours from that moment. And having the conversation now, I think, helps everybody realize that if you're not looking at the total budget, you're not looking at the budget. And that's my point.
What's the potential benefit coming down from the State House legislation?
there's about 3 to 4 different proposals. One is a college reimbursement that could fall to the borough. There's an additional tax credit that could fall to the borough.
So we may see these costs be increased by
Yes.
mandate.
Yes, by
law.
mandate. Yes, I mean, some are, there's 2 different conversations at the state house, and it's Harrisburg, so take it for what it's worth. Some of them might be mandated, some of them you might have to adopt, as we did this particular tax break. We had to adopt it and agree to it. But there's more coming.
We should clarify, we're just remediating a mistake that we made. Like, we agreed to it and then we messed up. So we're just saying, we're not regressing.
I'm not sure that we did, though, to be honest.
I think
My understanding is that this is a one-time adjustment and
Correct.
that my understanding is the will of council was that this be the way it should have been applied. I mean, that this represented, its budget item represents the intent, so I support it for that reason.
All right, I'm seeing a majority here. I'm going to say okay. Number 10, the energy consultant. And actually, I'll throw all 3 together. We can just sort of have a conversation about these requests that have come in through the EAC.
I think it actually makes sense to keep them separate, and for the following reason, there was a really good discussion about these during the F&A committee meeting.
All right,
Maybe
well,
Cindy could-
I'll defer
I
to
think
you.
Cindy
Take them in whatever order you like.
So let's go to the EV charging stations. NIDA came and we just had a discussion of what the relationship would be like, and FNA came to a consensus that we will bring to you all at our next meeting, is to say, really that we being Borough Council can leverage the resources of NIDA to apply for grants strategically. So when we have grants with this charging station is a great example, when the majority of the project is funded, however, there are some fees associated in addition to the grant money, like this $5,000, that would be a perfect relationship, or a perfect ask for NIDA. An example of a,
I don't think it's a great ask for a minute, but
I'm sorry, which portion would be a great ask for?
the $5,000 for the
So could I
charging
tag on
station.
to this?
Okay.
So just take it generically, that if we want to, and I think Cindy made this point really well in the F&A committee, and I was very excited about it. If we want to take advantage of grant funding opportunities for capital expenses, for capital improvements, and we haven't budgeted by June 30th, there's a gap kind of, we don't have availability just-in-time funding. If we agree as a council to use NIDA funding, I'm sorry,
no, this is great, we're going to talk about this. I do, but this isn't.
Bob, one person at a time.
I don't know if you want me not to.
One person at a time. Bob,
So
go
we have
ahead.
this opportunity, this is what Cindy's point was is that we have this opportunity to pursue, to use the NIDA fund, if we all agree, kind of for just-in-time funding, for matching funds for grants. And I think that's, so in that sense, it may not need to be, if we all kind of nod that, yes, we would all agree that that's a good NIDA, maybe we don't, but it is for capital improvement. And then we wouldn't need to budget for it in this cycle.
So, Michelle, I'll get you next, but I just want to jump in. I don't even think this should be part of our budget because it is a capital expense.
Yeah.
It's either part of our capital improvement plan
Or it
it's
isn't,
part of-
right.
So, Michelle.
Yeah, they do need to give us. I agree that it should be in the capital budget, but the real, I think what the point I wanted to make is I think that the EV charging stations, once they are installed, we will be charging for energy, right? So
We will,
charging for,
yes.
we will be charging for electricity, so it might not be that easy in the beginning to figure out exactly what the small premium is that we need to recoup the cost and to make it revenue neutral so that the software and the annual network and software fees are covered by the cost of the purchase of electricity, but it's something that we can do over time. So it's almost like not even a real expense in the sense that it pays for itself.
There's revenue.
Yeah.
We set the fee.
Whichever budget it comes out of, we set the fee.
Which is why it's a capital expense.
It's a capital expense, but it's only become known to us in the last few months, after we did our CIP budget, and I think that's the issue here. And also, it's time sensitive because this is a voucher program through the Volkswagen diesel settlement that would have to be filed by the borough in December, and it would require from the EAC memo about 3 hours of staff time on the part of Ed Harmon to solicit estimates and supervise the installation. So council would need to get behind, that staff time as well as the $5,000, which would be fronted, and then it's reimbursed through this Volkswagen diesel settlement. It's called Drive Forward, which is a grant program.
So I'm going to suggest that because it is a capital expense, that 11 and 12 come out of this budget, and that we will discuss as a separate action item this evening how we may move forward with funding these EV stations.
Right.
Okay.
Can I clarify a question about that? Because from what I read and then heard at the infrastructure meeting, there is not a guarantee. I mean, it says there is an opportunity to be
That's right.
reimbursed.
It's not.
Yeah. So.
Well, but if we don't get reimbursed, we're not going to do it.
Okay.
Right, just need to
You get
clear
clear
for the
Also
state
add-
funding.
Okay.
I would also add that this is matching funds for a grant that's almost $30,000. So
Right.
this is, the EV stations have more value
Mhm.
than what
Sure.
we're actually investing.
Sure.
The value is closer to 30,000.
Can I just ask
We're not
more of a
gonna-
logistics question?
Go ahead.
And I know it wasn't addressed, but you said 3 hours of,
Yeah, the EAC estimated staff time that would be needed to file for the voucher.
file for the, I thought you said
December.
install, and I was
No,
like,
no,
wait a minute,
file
what?
File for the grant, they call it a voucher for this.
I had like an
Okay.
image of
All right, so here's an agreement.
installed, and like,
We can pull this off, and we can
Yeah.
discuss it a little later this evening. All
Thank
right,
you.
let's go to number 10.
Okay.
That's the last one.
Cindy, could I discuss 10?
Do you have something, I mean, it was discussed in finance and administration, so I'm looking to you.
We did not. We
Oh,
spoke
okay.
to.
Just about the EV.
The EV in regards to NIDA.
All right, then I'm going to go to
It's
Ryan.
not been discussed yet.
All right.
So number 10 was, this came as an EAC recommendation, and it was proposed as a consultant fee, but of course, the council can decide whatever we want to do. My thought is that this would be a fund. I would rather call it Climate Action Fund. It would be a pot of money that would be earmarked for climate action implementation. We have an ICLEI project underway that we've already committed to with a Temple intern, and Sean has been working with him. The EAC has put in a lot of time to collect the greenhouse gas emissions. And then in the spring, with the help of the software, the ICLEI software, we will be in a position to put together a preliminary climate action plan that's part of this academic year, already in the works. So by June, we're in a position then to act, to begin to take steps towards mitigating our greenhouse gas emissions. But we will have no money budgeted unless we create a fund at this moment. And that's what I'm proposing, and that's in line with the recommendation of the EAC. And so one way that the money could be used, and of course council would revisit this later, would be earmarked now, and then council could decide at a later date, yes, we want to go ahead and spend this money, or no, we don't. But this is to get it into the budget at this point. It could be used, for example, for a coordinator. A coordinator is somebody who would be needed to coordinate between municipalities that have already signed on for Ready for 100 to actually write a power purchasing agreement. So, for example, Conshohock and Upper Merion have already committed their councils 10,000, 17,000. And the more of the Ready for 100 municipalities in Montgomery County that make some monetary commitment into an earmarked fund, the more other municipalities put into the kitty. And then it becomes more and more possible that there can be bulk buying of wind energy or solar energy through a power purchasing agreement. This has already been done in Westchester with 6 municipalities, and it's being done in Philadelphia through the Energy Collaborative. And that collaborative is reaching out to suburban partners, and they're constantly now building new arrays and new wind turbines to create new renewable energy in the marketplace and new market demand. So the idea of the fund is to advance our own goals that we have committed to in the resolution of reaching renewable energy in 2040, and actually taking a concrete step in roughly June, summer of 2020, after we've decided on a climate action plan.
Okay, Cindy?
I have, I guess, a comment question.
Thank you, Rob.
So the first is just my personal opinion and comment. I mean, we all clearly are dedicated to being good stewards of our earth. We all unanimously voted for Ready 100. And I just think, to my point with Windsor Ave, it's a matter of process. We have got to actually finish a project and have it come to completion before we take anything else on. We're nowhere closer to Windsor Ave. We're just starting on Sabine Ave. We still haven't utilized the $90,000 parking study that we had. While, of course, we're all committed to the environment, I think that we should finish the priorities that we set out for this year before we invest in anything else. And that is my, again, personal opinion. My question then is to Sean, you know, are managers coming together who, in municipalities that have adopted this Ready 100, and are you all talking about, like, okay, now what do we do with this? Because I suspect between the expertise we have in the EAC and how tapped in, you know, you and Matt are with other municipalities in this space too, that perhaps for next year we can see what we can do utilizing the EAC and your connections before taking on a whole new project when we haven't finished priorities. So my question to you is, do you have a network, I guess, of other managers or supervisors who are looking at the question?
Yes, there is a network. We are plugged in. I don't personally have a recommendation. The staff has no recommendation on this matter because we just don't know enough about what this consultant is going to provide for the borough, what the relationship looks like, or what the deliverables are, or what authority and process we'd be ceding to a larger regionalized effort, and what sort of what comes with buying the ticket, so to speak.
Right,
so I don't. Those are just my initial questions, and I just don't have enough information to make an informed recommendation to you about this. And I think I'm in the boat with a lot of other municipal managers on this one, because there's a lot of great momentum and movement amongst. It's really regional. It's everywhere. It's in the county, of persons who want to be good stewards of the environment. And renewables is just one component of that process, that Mount Rushmore of things that we as a municipality have control over, that we want to effectuate change on. Climate change is real. It's happening. There's going to be plenty of 90+ degrees days in our future. That leads to cooling, cooling needs, that leads to health impacts, that leads to environmental impacts, that decreases air quality, and causes a host of other things. It's here. It's here. And if you want to read the reports that are out there about the economic, health, and social effects of changing environment, they're there for you to study. It's pretty scary stuff. But the managers want to embrace this momentum, but draw a bigger circle around our cornerstone issues that we have control over: stormwater, recycling, tree canopy, and I already mentioned stormwater, but and looking at our operations, our facilities and fleets, to make sure that the investments we're making are intelligent, like the intelligent investment the borough is making in its street lighting infrastructure. That's a big win.
Yeah.
So again, I rambled a little bit to answer your question. There are a group of 29 municipalities joined together in a consortium that are aware of this sort of groundswell of grassroots motivation. We want to harness and partner with that positive momentum, but we also want to draw a larger circle around the issues and concentrate on things that we can affect. And that process is still kind of coming together in parallel with that organization, as well as a partnership with Montgomery County Planning Commission and the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commissions. And we're really trying to play catch up to this process. I didn't know about this resolution until September of this year, and I found out about it from an employee from Montgomery County. So we're still kind of trying to catch up with the process.
Councilor Tobin Moffett, you have a question?
So I guess, well, I have two questions. So is this a now or never proposal? Either we put in the 12 now or we're forever lost, or we don't? You, sir, saying, you just answered me, you don't know. Do you know? Is it now or never?
Here's how I would answer that question. If I called it a climate action fund, so that it could be used for any number of things that as a council we would decide on. Part of it could be, for example, the Moncode Ready for 100 group would like to see a $5,000 donation from Norworth, a contribution, much like, because we're a much smaller borough than Conshohocken or Upper Marion, so it's by size. we could see something like that towards a power purchasing agreement.
Okay.
Okay, and
My handles are up, just let, you know, I don't like business like that, but keep going.
So, no, this is what Westchester did. I mean, in order to get to clean energy, municipalities have to work together.
No, I totally understand. I'm
They
just
have
saying,
to work
what
together.
documents do we have? Like, give
We
me.
have lots of documents from the EAC that they have sent us.
Well,
And there is some frustration from the EAC chair, you know, that they are working overtime, and there's no funding to support their projects. And we don't have to decide necessarily what we would fund, but we should, in my opinion, set aside some funding now, because if we don't, then we get to the end of our climate action process with no money to spend on anything.
would you then be in favor, if the budget were needed to be increased and we would have to increase taxes, would you agree to a direct line item that those dollars that we would have to raise, in a specific number, whatever that might be, that Sean would tell us, that it would go directly into reserves for this borough, so that we would have cash reserves, the same as some of these other entities do? Because what I'm hearing is, I understand that you need a line item and you want that to happen, and I get it, and reserve dollars, I totally get it. But again, we still don't have reserve dollars. This is back to that other piece. We don't have reserves for ourselves. I would love to be able to share with Conshohocken Borough, but we don't have, should a catastrophe happen in this borough, there is no reserve dollars to pick up this government and keep working. It just isn't.
Right.
And I listen, I'm with you 100%, but I think kind of the timing's wrong. That's where I'm at.
Well, can I respond?
Please do.
I mean, this council has allocated $10,000, for example, to the Sabine Park. You know, so the scale of what we're talking about here is just orders of magnitude above, you know, a park allocation. We're talking about controlling greenhouse gas emissions and cutting those emissions by 50% over the next 10 years if we want to meet the UN's recommendations and our own Ready for 100 goal. And to allocate $0 toward doing that is not in keeping with the resolution. I have been in communication with the Shade Tree chair, and I would be the last person to cut the Shade Tree budget. But we have reviewed the budget and identified $4,500 that we could shift from the Shade Tree budget to a fund for climate action. And so that would be a way to seed this fund.
What would be the impact of that shift, Rob?
We have details from the chair. Michelle's seen this too. That the tree plantings would continue fall and spring unchanged.
Yeah,
So
I asked that question when I thought, I wanted to find, I asked that very directly, I should have put that, and what he actually said was nothing would change. And he said, you know what, we actually rely on Morris Arboretum's recommendations, and they kind of say that you should fund like alternating years, like 10 to 12,000 one year, and then I think it was 6 to 8 the next year, then 10 to 12. So,
Is this a 6 to 8 year?
Sort of, this is a 6 to 8 year, like we don't really need it. So I was going to actually suggest that we take him at his word and like actually, you know, fund the Shade Tree Commission for $8,000 this year, because he seemed to be pretty good in telegraphing.
Are we
like,
allowed to do that?
We don't really have
The borough
plans
funds,
to fund
the
that.
Shade Tree is funded in a funny way. Get to the book, get to the book.
I have a few comments I'd like
Yes.
to make also.
Go ahead, please.
No,
That's the side.
I support, I want
It's still floating.
I have a few thoughts that I'd like to share with all of you and
Yes.
put together in my mind here. First of all, I support the allocation of money for this initiative, whether it's spent, whether it's put into a kind of reserve for action that would then be put into a cash reserve, or whether it's used to pay for the implementation of a power sharing agreement with Ambler and Conshohocken and Uncle Mary. I think probably, if we allocate the funds, then I think our manager could probably call the manager or a few of these managers and find out, like, why did they do it, and what, you might be able to quickly find out why it was a good idea for them. And if if your recommendation is that we not join in the power sharing agreement and the implementation of that, then we have it as a cash reserve or as for climate action, a climate action fund. I also think, as we're talking about the Shade Tree funding, at least the Shade Tree Commission's not trying to create their own private cash reserve. Because otherwise, a member of the Shade Tree Commission wouldn't be recommending that they cut their budget. Now, clearly, the council, for the many years that I've been on the council, clearly we have been overfunding the library.
Yeah.
or else they wouldn't have a $300,000 cash reserve.
That's
So it's not that we're
That's right.
in any way trying to underfund something. We have been overfunding
Funded.
them for many, many years to the point where they've been able to accrue $300,000. Now, granted, they do. I also send them money.
Yeah, sure, we all do,
I send them a
right.
check, and so do many of you do.
Yeah.
But they do. But they are sitting on the cash reserve that the borough does not have. And so we're looking. We just talked about increasing
Yeah.
their budget by $20,000
Well, that's what-
so that they can build their cash reserve another,
Well, makes
some
my point.
percent. and I would really like to reopen that discussion in light of the fact that we see a pressing need and we hear a public cry for funding this EAC initiative. And I really accept your recommendation that there's a stipulation that it flow into the cash reserves of the borough if it's not, if we don't agree that it be spent this way. And so I'd like to reopen the question of the library again, because I'm sitting here just thinking like, we've been funding them very fully because it's natural for anyone sitting at this table to say, absolutely, we need to fund our children's library or our public library. Like, absolutely, that's what we do.
Well,
what kind of people, what kind of monsters would be not to do that?
Let me lay out a process
I tried to
here.
finish my thought, but I sat for a long time without speaking, and I wanted a chance to speak, and now you're stopping me, but that's okay.
Let me lay out a process. It's rare that we do sort of horse trading like this at the table, but I think it is also a sign of this healthy process that we have built, because we can't have everything. It's not just about each line item independently. So let me ask a question to the group. Who is interested, regardless of funding source, sort of in this line item, number 10, in fully funding the request for $12,000 for the EAC? Then we can talk about where the money's going to come
I
from.
haven't had to say a word about it.
Okay, Michelle?
I think that it's completely clear that we made a unanimous commitment to 100% renewable energy by certain entitlements, and we are going to have to put resources into that. There's no doubt about it. I've spent a lot of time, I've read all the letters that, it's been a lot of public passion and support. It's hard to not just be like, well, yeah, of course, I want to fund it. And I read all the letters, and I listened really carefully to the EAC's representative. Thank you, Civic Association, for recording the meetings and allowing me to do that. And I've heard a lot of different things that this might be for. And I hear you're saying, well, okay, yeah, that's right, because we just want it there. And then we're going to, put together a climate action plan, and we'll have some concrete ways to utilize these funds. I've heard everything from a consultant to streamlining the permitting process, to taking a bare bones climate action plan and sort of taking it to the next step and filling in the details, to power purchasing agreements. I know there's a lot more. A lot of different things. I personally would feel more comfortable allocating money after there was a more clear set of priorities, after there is a climate action plan, which I think is something that will come into place next year. The climate action plan will be a well-developed climate action plan, which I think we're capable of doing internally. I think we're capable of doing that. Will be something that sets out the priorities for the borough and gives us a clear set of guidelines for what will be the next steps and how we'll allocate funds. And part of that should be something that I had a discussion with Chairman Lytle at a meeting in the spring about what he, of course, had the right terminology for. I was stumbling around trying to say it, a revolving green fund. We have some intelligent purchasing decisions that we're making, right? Our LED streetlights. The EV charging stations could even turn out to be revenue positive, although I don't know if we want to do that. But a number of the early things that we do may actually bring us a return in a fairly short order if we're smart about it. And what I said to Jesse in March was, look, I think we should be mindful not to just gobble up those savings into our general fund, but have a way internally to say, look, this was a net return on our investment in renewable energy. We should set aside at least some part of it and internally account for it and establish a revolving green fund. I think that will really help us in the future if we have the discipline to do that. So I'd really like to see a process to set that up, to figure that out, to and to draw upon our present and future savings, maybe even draw upon our future savings, but in a mindful way that it counts and balances
A little more fiscally
expenditures
responsible.
against
I get it.
savings.
I get it.
And I'd like to do it in the context of a well-developed climate action plan, which I think that council and professional staff will need to support and partner very strongly with volunteers in the community to make that happen. At that point, I'd be a lot more comfortable to say, yeah, we're funding because we know what we're funding now.
Right.
To the extent that there are power purchase agreements, that there are some kind of windows, timelines on, that's something I keep hearing sort of hints about this, and it's frustrating to me because I don't fully understand if we're missing some window, like a real concrete, like hard deadline.
that's
Like
what
this
things are
is when the group's being put together. If you don't get in now, you're not going to be able to have a power purchase agreement at any point, and you're never going to benefit from that. So it'd be helpful to know that. You look like you have an answer, so I'm going to shut up.
Well, there are, I think there will always be power purchasing agreements, so we could join one in 10 years if we decide to. I think timing is of the essence. We have a 10-year window, we know that from the UN. So the decision, I think what you're proposing, Michelle, is reasonable on one level, but it does delay us one full year because of our budgeting cycle. And so what I'm proposing is, I think, also reasonable, because it is establishing a fund, and it allows us to decide later how to spend that fund once we have seen the climate action plan.
We have already made a decision to put LED streetlights in, which is going to be, we're already taking action. We're already willing to put in EV stations. We're already willing to take those actions.
Well, we haven't decided on that.
And so I think one problem is that if we hire a consultant, that's not really taking an action to reduce our greenhouse. It's so easy to hire a consultant and say, well, they're gonna get us a perfect climate action plan, and then we'll know what to do. And I just want us to probably just pass this resolution, pause, take a breath, and engage in a little bit more internal planning and prioritization before we start funding projects. And
Okay, Michelle, I respectfully disagree. I often agree with you, but I disagree with you on this because the timing is so crucial. It is not necessarily a consultant. It could be a sustainability coordinator who actually does the work that our staff doesn't have the time to do. Whatever it is that's recommended in the climate action plan. I share the frustration with the consulting dollars that are going out the window.
Yeah.
And this is about implementation. I think we could see the fund with the proviso that it would only be used for implementation. That would be visible and tangible for the community. And if the council decides not to fund whatever project, as Gigi said, it would go into the reserve.
I would also like to respond to Michelle. You're exceptionally, you study the materials of the council work exceptionally well. You think through beautifully, and I'm also persuaded. What I don't see is why not both and? Why not begin the funding of the Green Fund now, even without a real absolute concrete plan for how we're going to spend it? We know we're going to need it. It's not like a mystery that we're going to need that money. We're going to need the money. Why not begin saving for it now? And I also think consultant's a misnomer. I mean, I think it's a little bit like a retirement fund. If we're going to have the funds available to do this important work, if each of us had put away $10,000 when we were 20 years old, we wouldn't have to save any more. I think there's also time is of the essence here, and I think the sooner we get started, the better shape Norworth Borough will be in. And so I'm just supporting the same argument. But I also really agree with everything else you said, just the timing.
Yeah, so the way I see it is we're going to get to next June, we're going to have this great climate action report, and it's going to have lots of ideas, but unless we have some sort of budget item to deal with some of these ideas, we just won't be able to do anything, right? Because that's the way the budgeting works. We need to budget in advance for what we're going to see in June. So that's how I see it, and that's why I support this, because I know that come June, we're going to have lots of great ideas, and we'll be able to pick and choose for ways to use this money.
I'm just going to, let me throw some information onto the table, and I have a question for Mr. Metro, which might inform this. What I'm seeing right now is that if we choose not to fund this fund for $12,000, the changes that we've discussed at the table here bring us to a 1.5% tax increase. If we do choose to fund this fund, it brings us to a 1.8% tax increase. I'm going to ask Mr. Metrick for sort of, read your crystal ball. You have a number of numbers that are still floating. Do you think that they are floating in a way that is trending upwards?
Can one of those crystal balls predict the outcome of an FOP contract arbitration?
I'm not going to ask you.
Can I have that for free?
To publicly break down all of those numbers swirling through your head, just for some general guidance.
May I ask a question? What those numbers would be if we keep the amendment recommendation for the library, given that we have overfunded the library for many, many years?
I think, I would add separately, you would be able to do both at 1.5%. I don't think. It would move it down maybe to 1.48 or 4.7.
Because we're talking about $12,000 versus $20,000.
Yeah, so you're going to bring it down. You would be able to fund the environmental fund, and you would bring your increase to like 1.45% instead of 1.5. But hold on, let's get an answer from Mr. Metrick.
Well, I do trust your math, Aaron. I mean, that's how I do things a lot too. Just quickly, kind of on a napkin. I guess what I can say is there's not going to be any big surprises between now and the end of the year, upwards or downwards. The budgeting process typically moves towards higher Polaroids. It's kind of like watching the Polaroid snapshot you just take, develop. We move towards higher and higher resolution. As we move through time, move towards the end of the year. We might be able to, if we have funding, pay down some debt early. That's a possibility. We're working on a few health insurance items that might reduce costs a little bit. I think, honestly, Aaron and Council, the budget, you're really looking at what the costs and expenditures are going to be. I'm really only looking at a small handful of line items at this point.
That's what I wanted to understand, because if we're discussing a difference of 0.3%, sort of, and it could go in a couple different ways. Watching the clock, what is the, how much time do we want to spend on this decision?
Can I make a suggestion?
Cindy had her hand up first, and then I'll go to Michelle, and then.
Money
we need to
aside,
decide
I'm just
something.
going to go back to how are we going to operate as a council? Like,
I know.
why we're talking about more projects when we haven't finished the
We
projects
still
that
don't
we
have netting.
identified
We haven't settled that.
in 2019. And I just think as a general rule, that perhaps we say, let's finish the projects that we agreed that we would finish. Let's not put more on the office in an already stretched bandwidth. And that's a motivating factor for us all to work collectively and get stuff done. I'm hesitant to say, we're going to do this line item because we're committed and have there be no teeth behind it.
I need to put it, we
Michelle?
both voted for Ready for 100.
Yeah, I did.
And so you knew that was a project we were putting on the table. So
We're conflicted.
Can't take it down now, right? We did agree not to do more than one.
So what I'm trying,
My suggestion was, this was my suggestion, this is something I could be comfortable with. I could be comfortable with, say, setting aside $10,000 for the renewable,
Energy,
Ready for 100
environmental.
fund, not to be spent until a climate action plan is finished, and not to be spent without, and then it's like not an open fund, council will make decisions, we won't just run out and hire a consultant, we'll do a climate action plan, but we'll have that money there. I mean, I'd be okay with going with Fred's number in the library, which would bring it to a sort of compromise position between what they had last year, what they asked for, be 197, and then they would balance out. So I'd be comfortable with that, and then we wouldn't be doing a net increase one way or another.
Thank you for proposing a compromise.
I would like to second that.
207.
I think that's a lovely compromise, and I hope others will see it that way too.
Wait, 207, not 190.
No,
I'm sorry,
207.
May I reiterate what she's suggesting is we agreed on 206, 207 for the library, bringing that down to 197, which is still over, Fred suggested that, bringing it to 197, which Fred offered, and then reducing the EAC contribution to 10. But with the stipulation, with the provisos.
Frank, I thought you
moving 10
recommended
from
207.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this is.
No,
I thought you said what?
No, I said 197 as a
Cindy.
Fred said you guys.
Yeah, we look so
Okay, all right, that's the proposal, is to take the library funding to 197 and assign $10,000 to this fund the spending of which will not happen until further approval by council.
Aye.
Okay, we agree to that. Okay. Well, congratulations, council members. We've made it to the bottom of the list.
Thank you.
I am going to quickly summarize the amendment as it stands on the table, and then we can take a vote. So we have a motion to advertise ordinance 1020, amending the motion to amend the 2020 borough operating budget with the following changes. $0 for line number 141100. Library funding to be 197428. Line on your agenda is number 6, the Houseman, that was approved as is. The swap of dollars from line 8 to line 7 for the NDA and economic development. We were okay with line 9, who still has it right in front of them. My computer went to sleep. And, thank you, 9, we're okay with the volunteer firefighter tax credit. We were moving the EV charging stations off of this list to be discussed later. And $10,000 for the renewable energy regional consulting fee. That brings us to a minus $126,693, which means, assuming that all these other numbers do not change, it would be a 1.5% tax increase. Or, yes. No, not a 1.5% tax increase, a 1.5% increase to our budget. The millage and percentage real estate to be determined. I'm sorry, I spoke too quickly. Because real estate taxes are only a percentage of our total budget, so it's different.
But we should point out that even if we took the library even lower and did not approve this renewable energy, we would still be 1.2% or something.
That's right, you're moving tenths of a percent.
Yeah, so this is not.
So with that on the table, all in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you very much. It's unanimous. We move on to 7E, infrastructure.
I move that the Borough Council accept the main bid from the main bid from Republic Services, the lowest responsible bidder for the collection and disposal of trash and recycling for the years 2020 to 2022 to approve or not to approve add alt number 3, spring cleanup, and authorize the borough manager to enter into a contract for these services. And Mr. West can.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Gigi. Mr. West.
Great question.
We need to be
here all night. Thank you. Working on my dad brand. So everybody has received all of the contract bid tabulation. I'm not going to go through it. We do have a responsible low bidder. We do, that would be Republic Services. We do have a representative from Republic Services in attendance tonight. I thank him for sitting through a great civics lesson. That was a really good exercise in budget decision making. The decision that is before council is, the easy one is to approve the lowest bid, main bid. The decision that is before council that you will have to either vote yes or no for is to whether or not to include bid alternate number 3, which is the spring cleanup. Spring cleanup, it's going to be a total of $19,727 over the 3-year term. So that's only, it's going to be $19,727 over 3 years. It's about $6,300, $6,500 per year. 2020, 2021, 2022. So that's the decision that I need from council. The other things that were included in the add alternates don't need council approval or decisions on. They are just prices per 96-gallon toters. The price for additional bulk pickup items and Christmas trees were included in the main bid. Any questions, comments? Yes.
Hi. So on the document, it says once a week pickup of trash, recycling, brush yard waste, and bulk pickup. Same day, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, once a week. What does once a week mean?
Once a week of each of those things. So
once a week of each of those things.
So Saturdays. And no weekends.
So trash, recycling, yard waste, and bulk pickups. That's 4 days a week. I'm having trucks come through the town?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So bulk pickup and trash will be typically the same thing. It's the same truck, same idea. We haven't worked out those logistics yet. It's at least 2 trucks for recycling and 1 for trash.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, second question is let's talk about spring cleanup.
That's what I'd like.
I like the price, but this goes to the EAC question. While part of me has a sentimentality for putting all that stuff out and seeing everybody else's stuff, and then you know the pickers come and all that good stuff that happens. But what really happens, right, is the trucks come through town, and then whatever's left, we know where it's going. It winds up where, Rob? Where does all of that wind up?
Landfill.
In a landfill. Would it land in a? Would it be in a landfill whether we collect it or not? I don't know. I don't know. Probably, but I think. You know, part of what I wanted to say earlier about the conversation about the library, and we talked about the funding of the fund for Ready for 100. I was here when Pannoni came with a very beautiful presentation about what would have to happen on stormwater. And if we could just get half of Norworth to put in rain barrels and remember all of those beautiful gardens we were all going to install. And then we didn't. And then nobody picked up the ball. So the Civic didn't do it, and somebody else didn't do it, and everybody else didn't do it. It goes back to the idea that while there needs to be community engagement, and when I think about this piece, I cringe at this stuff being chucked into the back of the truck and going into the landfill. So maybe an education piece, this is really more for you, not for you, that an education piece with the EAC could review something about this kind of pickup.
Yeah, this is a fair point. I mean, in finance, we were talking about how actually, you know, when we do spring cleanup, I picked up my neighbor's mirror and someone picked up my bookshelf. But maybe we could still do something like that. You know, have like a community swap day. But then you put your junk back in your basement instead of paying. I mean, that could be another option.
I'm just saying, like, we know where it's going. I wish we could do something about it.
I know, when I put my stuff out on the curb, I would say over the course of the week, at least half, 75% is taken by people. Because it's useful stuff, I just can't use it. It's like a roll of left, you know? Like people drive around with no left. I can use that, you know, contractors look for spare material. Like, I mean, all kinds of stuff that I couldn't give to anybody else, but people come here because they know good stuff's going out, they pick it up. And they like fix it and they use it. And it's like, great. Yeah.
I'm going to change hats. I'm going to put on my volunteer firefighter hat. It is the opinion of the fire company that the efforts of the spring cleanup in reducing the fire load, that is the amount of combustible material jammed into all these houses, improves the safety of the residents, and it absolutely improves the safety of
my basement, I can tell you that.
To go into a basement, and you know, and regardless of spring cleanup, they exist where there is so much clutter and so much material because it's all still good and someone can't bear to throw it away.
Right, I know. Yep.
Can I measure it? No. But that's your public service message. Now I'm going to be your council president again. Yes, Ms. Mayor.
As mayor, and I was going to reiterate or something to the effect that it encourages people to get rid of stuff that would ultimately possibly contribute to a hoarding situation. But it's a problem because we accumulate stuff in our homes and it becomes problems with the police, with the fire groups. I think it encourages safety within the homes, and I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, I think. Oh, I'm not against that.
Let's have you speak. So you have a chance then for Bob, Fred, you'll have, and then.
Yeah, I don't agree. I made the comments, I felt totally flat, that I thought Spring Cleanup Week was like Shark Week, that nobody got with David Bordeaux. I feel like it kicks off our block parties, it kicks off the yard sales. I actually think it's a big cultural component. It's when everyone posts, it's the most wonderful time of the year on social media, it's like a cohesion thing.
Okay, Bob.
I just have a question. Just, how do they charge us for cleanup week? Do they charge us by weight?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or do they charge us just a flat rate for
It's
doing
going to be
it?
this flat rate.
It's a flat rate.
The bid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you look at that compared to what we have been paying over the past 3 years, it's pretty favorable.
It's a good rate. It's a good rate.
It's a great rate.
It's improved considerably.
It's improved. But
And there's also a benefit received by our public works crew not being involved for a whole week's worth of work. So there's a benefit there.
I guess I just want to say something pointless. I feel as though that over 20 years, the quality of the material that people are putting out isn't as good. And so I just want to encourage borough residents, put your good stuff out. I see so much less of it than there once was, and it could just be that a lot of people have moved, and now there's new people who moved in, and anyway.
That's my I'm going to move this along.
Thank you.
Council, we have this motion on the table. How would you like me to describe this as sort of an amendment or included in this
Just
motion?
like select the approve or not approve.
Approve, okay. So we have a motion on the table to approve the contract for collection and disposal of trash and recycling. Can I just get a straw vote? Should it include spring cleanup week?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So including spring cleanup week. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you. Mr. Weisbord, I will make sure I try to incorporate that into the next contract. Thank you. Quality.
Only good Mr. Metric?
I do have scrap left now.
He just stepped out. That's too bad. I wanted to give major props and kudos to our capable assistant manager for managing this bid process from soup to nuts.
He's going to come in this door any second. So just be ready, and there you go. It's gone, huh? There. All right, 7F. Can I get a motion to amend the zoning code? I believe infrastructure.
I have it.
Advertise to amend the zoning.
Sure. This is just an advertising motion. I move that the Borough Council authorize the Borough Manager to advertise Ordinance 1019, amending the Norworth Borough Code, Chapter 124, per the attachment.
Okay. Is it 1019 or 1020?
It's 1019. It was 1020, it's 1019.
Now it's 1019.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
On this motion, it says 1019.
Sorry, just make sure
On
you get the
the actual, it's 1019 is on the amendment, or ordinance. 1019.
We'll get the right number on the ordinance. Is that acceptable to you?
Oh, so it's 1020?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Can I get a second? And then I'm going to ask Mr. Weisbord for some background for everybody.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Weisbord.
Okay.
Why are we doing this?
My understanding of this, I'm actually very tempted to ask Ms. Panopoulos to review this, but just add to what I say, if you would. So my understanding is that we are doing this based on this. We have decided to amend the Norworth Borough Zoning Code based on a lot of thought and consideration we've given to building heights, especially on the south side of Haverford Avenue, that if they were to be built to 36 floors,
36 feet.
Excuse me, 36
Careful
feet. Wait. They actually would. There was a diagram that we saw about a year ago, and that many of us have been thinking about, that it does lead to blocking the sunlight. Particularly in these months, the darker months of the year, where the sun angles are lower. You can go down there, midday, and you'll see that the sun, if the buildings were taller, the sun might even be blocked all the way across the street. So we'd have more of a canyon effect. So the idea was to kind of be sure that we have still a lot of light and air, particularly on the south side of Haverford Avenue. It's also my understanding that from talking to some planning commission members, that they have in their minds that they're looking at how to create several districts within the 5A district, so that it's a more distinct kind of ecosystem. That there's a difference, say, within the 5A between the buildings that are on the south side of Haverford Avenue and the buildings that are on the north side of Haverford Avenue and the mid-blocks of Essex and Forest and North Narberth. That there's kind of a different issues with those different zones or those different overlays of the 5A. And the third one would be along Windsor Avenue. There are different issues related to the zoning of these three parts of 5A. So they want to look at that more. This ordinance really just lowers all of the
lowers the height within all of the 5A to 26 feet, which basically leaves room for 2 stories, and but does not change the zoning along Windsor Avenue. You want to add to that?
Okay.
Wait, I have to take a second.
Any questions?
Okay.
Any,
Just like a
okay,
picture
all in
help.
favor of advertising this ordinance?
Aye.
All in favor? Yes. Any opposed? All right, hearing none, thank you. It will be advertised and will come up at our next meeting.
May I ask Mr. Weisbord a question?
Yes.
Quick one. Mr. Weisbord, you saw that we received an email with about 6 bullet points from a member of the public. Maybe you didn't.
Oh,
I did. I can share Mr. Walco's answer.
Thank you so much. That's all I
Shall I
want.
share them aloud?
Please do.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
They are. We received questions from a resident who then asked us to read the answers aloud. Number 1, will the height, these come from Terry Fox. Number 1, will the height of all buildings in 5A downtown be limited to 2 stories with the exception of the corner lots on Windsor Avenue? The answer is yes, except for those permitted along the Windsor Avenue corridor as specifically set forth in the code. Number 2, will the Ricklands, 200 Forest, and Cadence, 203 Haverford developments be allowed 3 stories as planned and approved? The answer, yes, they have vested rights that cannot be taken away with a later code change. If their plan expired 5 years from their plan approval date, which happened earlier this year, and they did commence construction, then they would be subject to the new code requirements, but I don't think that's going to happen. That's Mr. Walker speaking. Number 3, in the event of teardowns, will the lots of current 3-story buildings in the 5A be grandfathered to allow 3 stories, or will they be held to 2 stories? The answer, assuming that teardowns require land development, which they would if it was a complete teardown, then 2 stories would be limited. Number 4, for example, in the event of teardown and redevelopment, would the 4 pomegranate properties at 105, 107, 109, and 113 Forest Avenue be held to 2 stories? Is Pomegranate the owner?
Yes.
Okay. The answer, if those properties are in the 5A district, then they would be limited to 2 stories, and they are in the 5A district. Number 5, what about the Cook properties, which extend from the Little Gym on Norworth Avenue to and including the American Family Market on Halford Avenue? In the event of teardowns and redevelopment, would they be held to 2 stories? The answer is they are also in the 5A. They would be limited to 2 stories. Number 6, are there any exceptions? And Mr. Walco writes, the only exception in the 5A that I am aware of is the Windsor Avenue exceptions that are set forth specifically in the code.
Thank you.
Morgan?
Thank you. All in favor? Oh, we already
We already did that.
You
We'll do
threw
it
me
again.
back into a motion must be on the table, sorry.
saying it.
7G. Can I get a motion for the next ordinance?
I move the Borough Council authorize the Borough Manager to advertise ordinance 1020 amending the Norworth Borough firefighter tax credit for the attachment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. This was what we discussed about
Yeah.
amending the year of service credit. Is there any further discussion?
Sounds like this one needs to be changed to the number. This is the wrong number.
It says
Yes.
1021. Yeah, I'm sorry. It should say 1021.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 1. Thank you. All right. Moving to 7H, infrastructure, Bob.
I move the Borough Council authorize the Borough Manager to engage VSBA, that's been Terry Scott Brown Associate Architects and International Consultants, Inc., to provide cost estimating services for the final design and engineering plans for the Norworth Avenue Bridge at a cost of $4,320.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
Mr. Metrick should probably.
Yeah, I was
brief
gonna
us
say.
on that.
Years ago, prior to my tenure with the borough contracted with VSBA for architectural services to design certain finishes, cast stone elements, metal elements, lighting, to improve the overall appearance of the Norworth Avenue Bridge. They did so, they designed that. Those services were rendered to the borough as a separate consultant, not as a consultant through the agreement, the engineering agreement the borough has between PennDOT and Pinoni. So any of services that are rendered for architectural services are entirely the borough's responsibility to pay for. We can't get reimbursed for these services. That decision was made many years ago. We have a bridge that has benefited from that input and architectural design. And at this point, we are in the final stages of preparing to submit final plans to PennDOT in December. As part of that submission, the borough has to give PennDOT a reasonable estimation of the cost of the construction of that bridge. The engineering team is going to do the bulk of that work, but in order to cost estimate the materials I mentioned earlier, the cast stone, the metal, the brick, and lighting, we will need to work with this architectural firm sort of as a subcontractor within a direct relationship to the borough to provide those cost estimating services. I don't really think we have a choice here. It's just what we have to do to get the plant, the bridge as it's been designed over these many years to the finish line.
Any other questions?
Do we have any year-to-date expenditures from this particular line item that we're not reimbursed for? You know what I mean?
We have not written any invoice. We have not received any invoices, spent any bills on DSBA in my tenure with the borough.
Right, okay, thank you. That was really my question. I'm like, I remember talking about it. I don't remember any bills.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes, thank you. I have two additional items, I know it's late, these should be quick. Go. We have three openings on NIDA? Two openings on NIDA. We have two applicants.
No.
And the reason I bring it up is because we also would like to send a request to NIDA for funding for the netting for the fields, which is what we discussed. The way the ordinance was changed maybe 18 months ago, 24 months ago, that we need to make a formal request to NIDA before they can consider something and release the funding. Now is the time. And they are challenged to meet, organize, and plan because down to members, including they have no chair, they would like to be fully staffed before they have chairs. So Michael Staub of 222 Sabine Avenue and Ira Winston both applied for NIDA. I believe they're fairly well known in the community. And, looks like Crystal. There's Ira.
There's Ira. Where's Ira? There.
So, if there's a will, someone would like to make a motion for appointments.
So I move that Michael Staub and Ira Winston be appointed to the NIDA for the terms that are available.
And Sean's holding up a finger because he's going to bring it up. Can I get a second and we'll seconded? Okay, thank you. And we'll fill in the dates.
Yeah.
One of these vacancies expires 12/31/20. The other one expires 12/31/23.
So I would move that Ira Winston be appointed to the term that expires 12/21/23, and that Michael Staub be appointed to the first one.
Okay, friendly amendment accepted. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Was there a December 13th deadline for application?
I don't.
Well, either it's done.
Okay.
We're
And
allowed
here's
to
the
do
reason.
that whenever.
It doesn't matter.
And the reason you missed when we were out of the room is we need them to move forward. So if you were planning on applying and hadn't yet, my personal apologies.
But we have lots of openings in many other parts.
Yeah, me too.
There's no shortage of volunteer opportunities.
May I say, there was a recommendation to appoint someone to the EAC spot that came from the EAC.
Oh.
So we have a name of someone that we could appoint.
Checking.
This
Give me the name.
The name is Sasha Alexandra Weaver Komaraskagis.
I did not receive
That came from the EAC, I guess, to infrastructure, and then we didn't have time for it.
Can we discuss that at the next meeting?
I assumed we were going to do this in December, so I would
Yeah,
ready to that.
let's do that in
Okay.
December. But sort of moving things along here in the borough's agenda, can I get a motion to request NIDA to fund 1/3 of the cost of the
I so
net
moved.
replacement? So moved, is there a second? Bob got second, any further
No,
discussion?
I think Fred
Or
got it.
Fred, okay, give it to Fred. Fred gets the
I
second.
just was voting.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. I appreciate your help in moving those things along. Mr. Manager, do you have a report?
It will be filed with the meeting packet.
Mr. Solicitor, anything?
I spoke with John Walker, and he informed me that he's working with borough staff on the items that are before council at this meeting. And other than that, he has nothing more to report.
Thank you. Monthly reports have been filed. Comments for the good of council?
Dickens Fest needs volunteers. And so if you have time, you should get out there and volunteer. Ed Ridgway is here. Ms. Bezak and Ms. Stubb are working with trying to get this thing up and running. It's December 8th from 12 till 4. So get out there and get it done.
My only question, if you volunteer now, is it too late to get a costume?
No.
See, there's an opportunity.
You can have a hat.
That's right. Any new business?
I just, I was just going to propose or move that the council requests NIDA funding for the EV power stations, or at least to support that.
See, there's some new business. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I would just pay for it out of our capital budget.
Yeah, that's what I thought we
and
were
they'll
going
pay
to
for
do. That's
themselves.
why I thought we moved
Do
to
we
the
have
capital.
that? But we don't, it's needed before we have an opportunity to fund it through the capital budget.
Right, because of the December.
Is that right?
We can amend the capital budget right now.
We could.
So why not, why would you, we voted for it.
That's okay.
It's done. You know what? We'll let them have a conversation.
Yeah, right. If it can be done, it can be done. If it can't,
But
yeah.
by no means is sort of punting something to NIDA
Yeah.
that they're going to, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we're all working together in the borough here, but they are their own
Right,
individuals.
I mean, I think taking into account the budget's faster since if they can, the one will make next.
Well, I
Well,
think
now they have new members,
now
so
they
they'll be
have
meeting
members,
monthly.
They will be meeting. Any other new
Well,
business?
just related to that, Aaron, could we have a motion to express council support for filing the voucher in December? It would require 3 hours of staff time.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
No.
No. One no.
I don't, I wanted to ask my question, Mr. Mitchell.
Old business, the bridge.
Sorry, new business. So John drafted the borough property agreement for use of the borough facilities. This was mentioned a little bit earlier. I brought copies of a draft for everyone to review. And we're just looking for, so all the highlighted terms are tentative.
Can I object? I'm sorry, we discussed this at FNA, and this draft now has to go to the office to look, and then it'll come back to the whole table.
Okay,
So we're not ready for it quite yet.
okay, so should I give these forms to?
Give them back to
John. Sorry.
To the office, yeah. Give them the
Okay.
office.
Pass them across.
Yep, thank
Got it.
you.
All right, may I ask, there's a rec board meeting tomorrow, would it be appropriate to bring
Not
the
yet.
draft over?
No. It's gonna be to
It's
the
not ready
office
for that
and
yet.
council. Yep.
Not even close.
Old business.
So,
Norworth Bridge.
So once again, I'm going to begin this discussion asking Michelle to inform us about the contract agreements, since you read them.
Oh,
Did you read them?
I did read.
You did read
They're all
them,
the
so
same.
good, so I believe that you read them, so you can report us. Norworth Avenue Bridge, many years ago, this is again one of these legacy projects that we inherited. This is many years ago. The group of residents worked with the council to select, to advertise a project for the Norworth Avenue Bridge, which would be to create art on the interior panels of the bridge. The architects designed 12 panels for the east and the west side of the bridge. You will see them as you cross the sidewalks. They're cast stone panels, and if they're just blank, they'll cost about $20,000. The estimate is they would cost $20,000 at the $20,000 to the cost of the bridge.
Which we would pay 100% for,
Which
that's
would be
not reimbursed.
Right, non-reimbursable.
Is
We're
that
sure
not,
about that?
I'm not, no, that's,
No.
that, we'll find out if that's non-reimbursable. That,
Unknown at
that's,
this
I
time.
mean, it's a part of, it's a
I think it
finish,
was.
it's a finish of the bridge, just like the brick.
Other
Just-
part,
it's-
right.
I mean, if you, it's arguably, it's a bridge finish.
Understood.
It's a,
We don't know.
it's an, well, no, it's
Part of the bridge.
It's part of the bridge, and we do know. It is, it's a just as a building's built with a metal frame or a concrete, and then it's.
You can't make it
It has a facade, it's part of the skin that wraps the structure. Okay, the skin in this case is brick, and it's sandstone panels. The question is whether we at that time, the council also agreed to pay the 3 finalists of that competition a sum of money to come up with 3 final designs. So the 3 artists were picked, but they never provided their 3 final designs. So this is one of these things that we should, I mean, I would advocate we finish. I suppose there was already an agreement, maybe an unsigned agreement, that said we would pay the finalists money to create these 3 final designs. So that's what.
Oh, I mean, I don't.
And I was going to move that we pay them.
I mean, it was really useful.
Pay the artists.
I don't
What's
think
the
that-
amount,
I
please?
don't think the
I think
agreement,
it's
Michelle?
$1,500 per piece.
it's not,
Not shaking his head though.
that's,
What is it,
yeah,
John?
it's not.
It's a $500 down payment on execution of the agreement and a $500 payment on delivery of the.
So it's
It's
$1,000 a piece.
It's $500 upon signing of the agreement, $500 upon completion of deliverables. The agreements aren't signed by the borough.
They were not signed, which is why we're bringing it up now.
Right.
So we would have to execute on that. As Mr. Bresci briefed, I still have more to say on this, but as Mr. Bresci briefed the infrastructure committee, he used the number 1,500. So that's it's fine, it's even better. It's only 1,000, it's 500, and then it's 500.
Some people understand 3 more artists.
Well, so no, wait. No, there are 3 artists. What's happened in the interim since these 3 finalists were selected is that one of the artists was a team called Traction Company, and it was a consortium of artists. And since they were selected, the leader of that team went out on his own. So there's still the Traction Company, and then there's the leader of that team. And Mr. Bresci is advising us that we should actually have all 4 entities participate, because the Traction Company is it was just his recommendation that we should have 4 of these for whatever the fee is.
Michelle?
I wouldn't have filled in a couple more things from what Todd had said, because you started, but you said the plain panels
Please.
were about 20,000. And I wouldn't, but
I
running this
didn't
by you,
finish.
because I could be right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I didn't
We
finish.
got off.
I got off track
You're gonna finish, okay, go ahead.
because the matter at hand, at least for the 2019, is to complete. Well, I just want to contextualize this. The question at hand right now at the table is whether to, finish this agreement that we had, that the council had, that the borough had with these artists.
Yes.
At some time in their lifetime. The next thing is that next year, or in the year that the bridge is completed, we will have to decide if we want to cast these designs, select a winner and cast these designs in stone. If we do, the cost for casting the stone, the material itself, plus the cost of the artist's services, is a delta of about $80,000 on the 20. So, and possibly up to $120,000. So it's a
Michelle?
delta of $80,000 to $100,000. Please, did I get that right?
Yeah, close to. I mean, Todd said that the 300 panels finished like art, but the design, creation, casting, delivery would be about between 100 and 120,000. That the stone itself is about a third of the cost. So he ballparked. He said the plain panel would be 20,000. If we did plain cast stone, stamped cast stone without artist designs, like if we just said, like have somebody do some
Like a
CAD
fish.
letters on it, whatever.
The
Some generic
architect,
thing, right?
if you had the architect design it.
Just
yeah.
taking out design costs then. I guess the production cost for the stamp cast stone is about 40,000. It's about twice as much as plain panels. If you want to have the full array of artist design, it would be between 100 and 120,000. If you wanted to do if you wanted to have Venturi Scott Bryant, we're going to have the architects do some kind of design. It would be $40,000 plus some additional amount for their design work. TBD, we assume less than, having an artist do an original design, but something we haven't explored yet. But just those are sort of the numbers, and I guess I wanted to say, I know the way, I hear how you're framing this, and it is one reasonable way to frame this. Another reasonable way to frame this is that we don't have any agreements at all, because they were never signed and money was never paid, and the artists have never really bothered us about it, and I don't really know if they care or not. And we could view this as we're starting anew, deciding, do we want art on the bridge or not? Because if there's simply no way that any of us believe that we're going to pay a premium of $80,000 to have original art on the bridge, I don't know that it makes sense to move forward and say, well, we want you to spend some time doing design, sort of on the hope that we might do production, but we kind of, I think we should, out of respect for the artists and just respect for ourselves and our own time, we should probably, what did you say, draw a bigger circle, Paul? Than rather just looking at the agreements and say, look,
Fred and then Gigi.
is there a possibility that we will move forward with the original artwork on the bridge? I feel like we kind of need to pick the issue up as if it were fresh.
I'm going to limit this conversation to 7 minutes because there are 7 of us. Fred.
Mr. Bresci also said that his experience is a little out of date, but in the past he had worked on a bridge project where PennDOT covered the art fees. So it's possible that we will not be out, we will have our regular cost share for the rest of the bridge, and it won't cost us $80,000, it'll cost us whatever, a couple. And so.
I'm sorry, I'm next.
Gigi.
Sorry. Not far from where we are right now. There are lots of grant opportunities that provide dollars for public art. We haven't had that discussion, but it has come up tonight, talking about leveraging grant opportunities and having those larger pieces put together in this room to have a conversation about what's important and what isn't. While I understand you're new and it's all new and we're old, that the agreement, however, affects the lives of the people we asked to come forward. They did come, they did give presentations. We went through a process, the public was invited. I'm feeling like, sorry Barbara, I'm gonna use Barbara's words, I feel like we're lousy employees. Like we didn't take care of it and we owe these people the money and they showed up at the work and we have to give them some of the money. We just have to do that.
All right. Cindy, anything from you?
Yeah, this is about 5 years old, the agreement with the artist? Almost, about 5 years. I think 4 or 5 years. I mean, I think if we want to just be good employees here, and maybe give them each the $500, but I would not proceed with art on the bridge.
Okay. Rob and then.
I would be interested in the initial payment, and then I would seek grant money or NIDA funds. I don't think we could possibly afford
we worked with
the
in the
full
borough.
cost.
Well, let me before actually I get to you, because everyone sort of had a chance to say, let me jump to
Actually, I didn't get a chance to give my opinion.
Go ahead and give your
I never got a chance, because my opinion is that I don't think we should just do art for art's sake. There was a resident here at the meeting who said, why don't you just like cast the borough insignia into the middle panel of the bridge and have the classic solution of the beautiful Pennsylvania Bridge? And I kind of agree with him. And I felt it was important to finish this piece of work that we started. I've actually been behind the scenes. I've been beating on this for 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
Like, what the hell? Why isn't this getting done? Before these artists die, we should at least pay them. But there's another thing here that I want to express my opinion about. There's a possibility that one of these artists will produce a design that actually blows our minds, and it's actually like a work of art that we can't not have. And that could be an amazing thing for the borough of Narberth. I mean, if there's a Gaudi or somebody like that, like if we get a piece of work, of art that's just like, so over the top good, then we'll find the funding for it and we'll have to have it.
Yeah,
but if it's not like that, let's just cast the borough insignia or have them blank. I mean, that's how I feel about it. So.
All right.
Now I've said my piece.
So is there a consensus that we want to have, or that we want to move forward with this? I mean, I'm not even going to, you all know the answer to the bigger question personally for yourselves in your mind. Should we move forward with the 3 artists? And then I'll get to the issue
Can I
of the
get
4th.
one clarification first? Because I've heard someone say that the artists have produced work. which there's very different situations.
No, they
It's very different
produced,
in my mind.
they produced a portfolio.
portfolio.
And in the portfolio,
Yes,
they
right.
particularized their schemes.
Yes.
But that was just for the sake of trying to win to be one of the top 3 finalists.
It's not like we owe anybody money for work.
No.
Arguably, they had an expectation that we were going to sign the agreement and
I don't
pay
even know if they
$500 to produce a conceptual design, and we didn't sign it. We did pay one of the artists, apparently.
Well, that artist probably asked.
That artist didn't, but I
We know
didn't see
they
their
did.
concept design, so, you know.
Okay, but again, Art, would you like to move forward?
No.
I have.
Wait, I don't know the
would
question.
move
I'm
that
sorry.
we pay the artists their $500.
Yes.
That we pay all of the artists.
3 artists.
Yeah, the 3 artists. We pay Traction, $500, and they split however they want, but we pay them
Yeah,
$500 each. Or make sure they each have received $500.
Right.
And then we await
Yeah.
more information about what the net cost would be to us, based on whether PennDOT would cover some of this, or whether there's grant funding, before making a decision. So we just, all we do now is pay $500.
Is there a second to pay the 3 winners
All right,
$500?
sorry.
Hold on.
The agreement says if we pay them $500, they're obligated to produce concept designs for us. Do you want them to do that?
Until I get the motion. Sure.
How big a concept design is that?
I'm saying, the agreement, then, if we pay them $500, obligates them to produce concept designs for review, discussion, and/or approval. By the way, we need to modify the dates, because time is of the essence in this contract, and we're 5 years late, so
Okay,
there's
so-
a process. But then, if they produce concept designs, we are then obligated to pay them each another $500. So, just to know, that's what
That
the
is-
contract obligates us to do.
So-
And if you want to know, it's not
but let's get the motion on the table, and then we can have a
So,
discussion.
just to know.
There was a motion, is there a second for the motion? Is there a second for
Well,
Fred's
I'll
motion?
I second it.
But then I made
Seconded,
another
okay,
motion.
now it's on the table.
Yeah.
And just so everyone is clear, really what we're talking about is committing $3,000 of
Right.
borough funds, $1,500 up front, $1,500 later, assuming they respond.
That was
right?
his motion, actually.
Our motion was just for the 5, but I
His
mean, given
motion
what's
Right, but contractually, you're obligated.
Contractually, you're obligated.
You do
right?
one, you have to be ready to do the other.
Fair enough. I would amend that. Then.
Okay.
Include the 1,000.
Right.
So amended.
Right.
I'll second that.
3 to 4,000.
Okay, so now that's on
Right.
Michelle.
Oh, no.
You, okay, Gigi.
I would say that you just retro voted for a $3,000 payment to the fire company in tax benefits. Why wouldn't we pay these people that have been waiting a very long time and get something produced that you may or may not want to proceed with? But I think Fred's point is correct. I have the floor, thank you. That Fred's point is correct, that we have to wait and see where the funding is going to come from further in the next steps.
Michelle.
All the talking we've done about how our budget is so constrained, how hard it is to apply for grants, we're already sort of tapping into NIDA funds, we might need to match a grant, we don't have the funding, and why not do this? Because when you do this, you're essentially making an implied commitment to the artist that we actually have a project to move forward with. Maybe put a whole lot more time into that concept, yeah, sure. Maybe put a whole lot more time into that concept design and in an attempt to win the work. And if you don't really have a serious intent to cast the stone and build it, it's kind of not even very nice. So from my point of view, I think the best thing we could do, I don't know we're obligated to do, nobody expects $500 at this point, it's been years. I think the best thing to do is to simplify our lives and think of a simpler way to build a bridge. The simplest way that will give us a nice, durable bridge that will last for generations.
We're going to vote on this. There's a motion on the table. Who else has something to add substantive to this debate? Bob.
I understand your point. You're the only person who interprets our intent as not wanting to do the art.
Yeah.
There's no implied intent anywhere that we wouldn't go forward. If we get good art, if we get a really good proposal, this community is going to be banging down our door to install it on the bridge.
One more point of order. I don't want to do the art. I think it's more can be feasible.
I'm gonna-
I don't want to do it. I'd like to do it.
Okay, Gigi.
We have a solicitor who could rewrite an agreement, being that this is out of date. We could rewrite an agreement with these people, go back and get new terms. This is not.
It's not worth spending solicitor hours to renegotiate.
No,
I'm sorry. Okay, all in favor of moving forward, say aye. Aye. There's 5. Opposed? 2. Thank you. I'll take a motion to adjourn, and then we'll go take a very short break and go to executive
I
session.
so move.
Second?
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.